What's going on, everybody? Before we get started, I need a sound check. Give me a mic check.
Test.
Do y'all hear us okay? Let me know. You know how this works. I always make sure the microphones are working in the way that they're supposed to before we actually get started. And of course, now the special guest is already ruined.
Hey, what's going on? All right, cool. I want to say hi to everybody. Some of you guys I know, like, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce. We've only emailed, right? Vinay, is it Vinny or Vinay or Vinay? I'm sorry, Vinay. Anyway, we've emailed, right? And so yeah, it's good to see. And I don't know some of these usernames. Toxis 8-Ball. Sorry.
We reviewed his 8-Ball game before.
Okay. I just don't know the handles. I don't always know handles. I'm bad enough with names and faces, but you get the handles in there. But anyway, I'm super excited to be here, and I've got my second monster going, so it's going to be an intense.
So, as y'all can see, this is something completely different. I've got Demetrius here with me. This is my coach from Minnesota. We met like a few years ago via the Cue It Up network. And I eventually went to Minnesota and went through Demetrius's 3-day boot camp. We'll talk more about that here soon. And the last time Demetrius was here with us was Christmas. If y'all remember, we did a couple of Christmas live streams and stuff. And it's not December, but Demetrius is here. Now, before we go into what we're going to be doing tonight, I will go ahead and remind everybody that I haven't forgotten about my 100,000 subscriber giveaway that I've got going on right now. If you're not aware of what I'm talking about, if you go look at my last live stream where I did my unboxing of my YouTube plaque, which might as well go ahead and get it so everybody can see. So I do have it hanging up on the opposite wall. You know what? I wonder if I can get away with just doing this just because.
Pretty cool, Chris. Congratulations, man. I said it to you already, but man, and thanks. I mean, the people that subscribe and support your channel, like this is really special. So keep going.
No, absolutely. But so if you watch the last live stream where I unboxed this and showed everybody, I also showed that I have a bunch of prizes that I was actually giving away in celebration of doing so. And in order to be eligible to win any of those prizes, you need to leave a comment on that live stream, and you need to be subscribed to my YouTube channel because it's being done strictly on YouTube. So anybody on Facebook watching right now, go to my YouTube channel and look at what I'm talking about. And you have to make sure that your subscription list is public, because after Demetrius goes home, because right now while he's here, we're completely focused on what we're going to do while he's here. But when he does go home, that's when I'll eventually go live again within a couple of days, and then start selecting all of the winners, because what I'm going to do is randomly select the comments from that live stream, and those that get selected, as long as I verify that they're subscribers, they will be the winners of those prizes. So I haven't forgotten about it. Just know that. But when I select the winners, it's going to be a little bit delayed now that Demetrius is here, because we're going to focus on what we're going to be doing while he's here. And so in the meantime, Demetrius, why don't you take it away and let everybody know who you are?
Yeah. So thank you. And by the way, Tanner, is he watching the end? This is awesome. Tanner. So we're gonna chat. I haven't forgotten, my friend. But okay. A little bit about me for those that don't know. I live in Minnesota, and I am a pool player, and I've been coaching full time now for 4 years. With kind of I'm in a weird niche, situation where I do 3-day boot camps. I was talking to you about this, and it was almost like I was talking about different styles of music. There's pop music, and there's like some. I'm more like a jam band, where I don't really do like these things that are good for radio, like 3-minute clips that make a good sound for in between commercials. I'm more like a live band where I'll play a song and extend it out to like 40 minutes and really get grunge and all this stuff. Like I'm more like in the weeds. And so when I was into coaching, I never really got interested in doing like an hour lesson. Although there's a time and place for that. But what I do is more people that really want to go down the rabbit hole and just go into a room, shut the door, and go down the rabbit hole with pool and really work on a pool game. And the way it originated was I do this for myself, as I'll do these extended training sessions. And so then I started having people ask me about lessons because I'm a good player in my area. And it didn't speak to me to do little onesie twosie things. And so I thought about it. I'm like, what if we did something longer? So I came up with a 3-day boot camp, and it's been really, really good. what it opens up the doors for is it opens up the doors for people to come in from all over the country and even the world. And so, because nobody's going to fly into town for a 1 hour lesson, but hey, for 3 days, it makes sense. And so I've been very fortunate, and I want to thank everybody that's come and trained with me. I've had some very amazing people that I've got to meet and work with. And it's just the fact that people come in and work with me and that I get to really help them with their pool game. And then that continues. I just thank everybody that's come out and trained. And for anybody that's interested in serious pool training, you can go to my website, which is mnpoolbootcamp.com, which is stands for Minnesota, mnpoolbootcamp.com. And you can learn a little bit more. I see what's the furthest somebody's come in. I haven't actually had anyone come in. No, that's not true. I had the gentleman from Israel had to reschedule. But anyway, I've had people that have moved from here to the U.S. from Spain and Poland. I guess that doesn't really count. Canada, Bahamas, Bahamas, Canada, California, Florida, whatever. Mostly North America is kind of the continent. But okay, too much monster. I'm going too many directions. So I think that when it comes to time for lessons, here's what I can also say is that different levels of players need different amounts of time. If you work with a beginner that's never held a cue before, the longest lesson you want to give them is 20, 30 minutes. 3 days would be silly. Intermediate players, maybe 2 to 4 hour lessons. But as you get, maybe lower level intermediates, 2 to 4 hours. But as you get like better players, strong intermediates, players that are pretty knowledgeable and have already developed a reasonable competitive, a good foundation for their pool game, that's who I focus on. Advanced to intermediate to advanced play, where you can really dig in and do a lot with them. And so I just wanted to kind of let people know that that there's a fit for each one. And for recreational players that are just getting into the game, I might not be the right fit. But even for those players, I've had some people reach out to me that as I've talked to them, I didn't quite feel like they were ready for a 3-day boot camp, but I was able to give them some stuff to work on to where little by little, I could kind of give them some stuff remotely to where 6 months to a year down the road, maybe we can get there.
Absolutely.
So anyway, that's a little bit about me.
So yeah, so if anybody's wondering about the boot camps, because I've been to the boot camp myself, and let me tell you, like I said, it's 3 days. I flew out to Minnesota. Demetrius put me up in his home. I had a place to sleep, and we were fed. And from sunup to sundown, literally 12 hours, basically, sometimes more, depending upon how good we're feeling after like the whole boot camp session. Because after the boot camp session part is over, there's still a pool table for us to actually still goof off around on. So sometimes it could be a 14-hour, but for 3 days straight, we obviously took a break for lunch and then we took a break for dinner, but then just went on and on after that. And holy cow, I guess our backdrop doesn't let me see it very well, but what I can see is this. Wayne, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. I really do appreciate it. This is a local of mine that I've actually had on my channel.
Well, tell them we're going to be tonight. Where are we going to be tonight at 7 o'clock?
Well, actually, yeah. The reason why we're doing this live stream right now at 1 o'clock in the afternoon Central Time, because everybody knows that I typically stream in the evening. But tonight, I have a league that I have to go play in Round Rock, Texas. So we're here, at least right now, trying to get everything warmed up for what we're going to be doing tomorrow and on Saturday, because we're pretty much probably going to do a very long stream where I actually use my studio microphones instead of our wireless microphones that are here, because I did have a question earlier. Zane Thind, I hope I'm saying that correctly. You want to know if me and Demetrius can have a match right now? The short answer is no, but there will be. We might do some 9-ball, we might do some 10-ball. Heck, last time we even did some straight pull. We might even end up doing that again. So sometime between Friday and Saturday, there will be some exhibition matches between us. We just haven't really quite figured out exactly what we're going to do, but we know it's going to be exciting because we had a lot of fun last time that we did this. Yeah.
I can say that I've prepared a number of ideas of things that I teach with my students that I can try to demonstrate on the table here over the next couple of days. So I will be doing some stuff that's I've got prepared. I'll also be able to do some Q&A. So if people have questions, maybe I can get on the table at some in the future, and I can take some of those things and put them into practice. But also I'll mention that we did play a match last night off stream that I we didn't turn on the cameras, and now I regret it because Chris, amazing set. He beat me 9-6. I want to congratulate you. That was the first. We've played a number of sets. That was the first set you beat me. He beat me 9-6. And guys, it was thunderbolts and lightning. Chris was hitting him good. So
thank you. I do
awesome.
appreciate that.
Awesome job, man.
Yeah, because if anybody's followed anytime Demetrius and I have been on stream, we did a stream, a couple of years ago when I was in Minnesota. We did a New Year's stream, and we did, I think it was a 10-ball set, and Demetrius beat me on there. And then when I had Demetrius here for Christmas, I think we did some 9-ball and some 10-ball and even some straight pool, and I lost all of that. And lo and behold, if there's no video record of it, it never really happened, right? But we did play last night to kind of get us warmed up because Demetrius flew in last night, and I did pull off my very first victory. It's just I don't have video evidence.
It was awesome. So over the next couple, so this stream, we will be getting into some challenge matches and some training over the next couple days. This stream, we're going to be talking a little bit. We're going to be doing Q&A, so we're going to be taking the questions and working through those. But also, there's some things that we wanted to talk about, and I wanted to talk because I'm going to post this on the Q It Up Network channel too at some point. So I want people that might not know you. I have a little bit about you, your YouTube, what you've been doing with YouTube, where it's going, and a little bit about your pool. Sure. And then we have some conversations that I think it would be interesting to share. So I told Chris, we got in the car, I'm like, hold on, we can't talk about this. We're going to talk about it on the stream. A little bit about slumps and about improvement, progress, and slumps, like measuring improvement, how you know if you're getting better. Do people have limits and caps, and when do you know if you've kind of capped out? And a little bit about, you were talking about a slump that you went through recently, and a little bit about slumps.
Sure.
And then I've got some things that were on my mind that kind of tie in with that. So we're going to have a little conversation coming up here, and then we'll comb through some questions.
Yeah, so I've been toying with the idea of wanting to maybe try to start podcasting. I don't necessarily know if I want to consider this to be a podcast. That's why I titled it a live Q&A. But when I told Demetrius about this, because between the Q It Up Network and the Pool Player Podcast, they basically cover the professional world. And I don't want to do that. I'm an amateur pool player. Everybody knows that. I don't ever strive to really be a professional, but I do strive to try to become a good pool player. Because if everybody knows me well enough, you should know that I don't like to describe myself as a good pool player. I like to describe myself as a decent pool player. I know what I know, and I execute things that I've taught on my YouTube channel, and that's about it. But if I can honestly say that maybe I would consider myself a good pool player if I ever break the 700 Fargo limit. And I casually try to get there. Y'all know I work a regular 9-to-5 job, so it's hard to juggle life and juggle pool at the same time, but I still try to do it. So when Demetrius and I were talking about what we're going to do tonight and today and what we're going to be doing while he's here, and we were talking about podcasting, that if I started to get into podcasting, I wanted to talk about the amateur world. Not to the point to where necessarily I want to follow amateur pool players and see where their journey is, and we can look at people like Chris Reinhold, for example, who used to be an APA pool player and now has transitioned over into the professional world. I'm not talking about stuff like that. I'm generally talking about to where kind of like what we're doing right now, where we're going to mention some topics and we're going to discuss about those topics. And those topics hopefully can kind of relate to basically anybody, but they're geared more towards the amateurs. But when we talked about slumps, slumps aren't just limited to amateur pool players. They're limited to basically everybody. And so when I told Demetrius about this, he thought it was a great idea, and he actually wanted me to come up with some topics to talk about along with the topics that he wants to talk about. And I recently told him about, literally within the past couple of weeks, I feel like I've been in a slump. And what I mean by that is after I went to the Texas Open, y'all remember when I had Jaybird here with me, I wasn't disappointed at my losses. I was just disappointed in how I didn't capitalize on the opportunities that I was given during those matches, to where when I lost to Vitali 9-1. And in my humble, honest opinion, if I would have capitalized on my opportunities, I probably should have lost 9-4. And because I didn't get that 4, that's what was disappointing. And then even in my second loss was the same thing. I had lost 9-3. And if I would have capitalized on my opportunities, I should have lost 9. Like, I'm still acknowledging that I should have lost. But if I would have lost 9-5 or 9-6, I would have been more satisfied, because those were the opportunities that I basically let go. Ever since then, I started noticing that as I'm playing leagues, as I'm in here playing straight pool, things just seem to fall apart. To the point to where, like, when I'm in here playing straight pool, I might be lucky if I can score 2 or 3 points after the opening break. Or when I go to league, I might be lucky if I can string 2 or 3 balls together. Whether I'm playing 8-ball or whether I'm playing 9-ball, it didn't matter. And the moment I started recognizing that more and more, the more I started realizing something is wrong. I don't remember the last time I've ever really played this badly, and something must be wrong. And I don't know how any of y'all might feel when you go through that, but I was super frustrated to the point to where when I'm in here, luckily this is, none of this is on camera, but I'm a lot more colorful when I'm not on camera. But when I'm on camera, I try to be as professional as I can be. But off camera, when I'm in this slump, I am as frustrated as can be and as colorful as can be. And I'm trying to figure out what's wrong. Now, maybe if you have a coach, it might be easier to get out of a slump. But my coach lives in another state, so I might text him, I might call him, and we might have conversations from time to time. But there's no one here with me to help me figure out what's wrong. And so what I end up having to go through is hours and hours and hours of torture and frustration. And there was a story we talked about with ego, and I really want you to tell that story tonight, to the point to where after that hours and hours of frustration, something clicked. I happened to notice something while I'm aiming a certain shot, and the ball went in. And it made me go, I wonder what that is. And I'll describe more about it. Basically, it's just, you're sitting there, you're aiming, and you're trying to line up the ghost ball. And, when anytime you're shooting a shot, when you get that feeling in your head or in your heart, like, just looks right, fire. You fire the cue ball and you figure out if you're right or wrong. And that's basically what happened. I started noticing a little adjustment that I was making, and it was very, very small, and I happened to catch it. And when I fired, the ball went in, and like, I had that feeling of, that felt good. Like, what was that? But then I said, let's set up another shot and see if I can replicate what I just did, which was noticing the movement, having that feeling of that the ball's going to go in if I fire, and the ball goes in. It's like, okay, this is all working on my home table. Because then next thing you know, now I started getting out of the first rack, getting into the 20s and 30s. I was like, okay, this feels good. Let's go to league. Let's see if it works at league. And it kind of partially works at league. It wasn't convincing enough to know, because I've told the story before of how many times have you ever done something before to where you discover something, it seems to work, so you do it, and then after a while, it just magically stops working for whatever reason. And that's kind of what I felt like might have happened. But then when I went to Round Rock to play on big tables for 9-foot tables, I tried the same thing, and it kind of started coming together. I was doing 4 or 5 ball runs, getting good safeties, and I'm like, I wonder if I'm starting to climb out of the slump. And like I said, that was, everything started about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And it was only within the last week or week and a half where I started noticing my climb back up to where I'm more accurate with my shot making. I'm more accurate with my cue ball movements, and everything starts to feel a little better. And then when we were done playing our set, because Demetrius already knows exactly what I'm talking about, and then we were done with our set, and I asked his opinion on, what do you think? And I was like, well, it's just one set. It's not a good enough sample size for me to give you any assessments. But then when we started talking about the slump, he had this story about ego that I really want him to talk about, because it resonated with me, and it made me feel like this must be exactly what I went through, because everything he said last night made absolute sense. And I honestly feel it's what I was going through, that I honestly think that everybody goes through. Demetrius, I want you to have the floor on that story.
So, by the way, people, you can go to my website. Again, it's mnpoolbootcamp.com. I've also been, something I'm very passionate about is mental game. And I've started mental game coaching. And I see Nate, Tam is in the chat. And so I just, my last mental game session, Nate was actually a participant, and I appreciate that. I've got plans for you too. So you and Tanner, don't lose my number. But anyway, what the format of that, by the way, is I have 3 people. We do 3 sessions, 2-hour sessions. And so we do 3 2-hour sessions with 3 people. And what we do is we do like a Zoom call where I have people bring some of the things that are on their mind with mental game struggles. And then we work through them. And I have an approach to mental game that I teach that is a general, so regardless of who I'm working with, I have the same outlooks. But I also then talk about the situations that arise that people bring to the table. So anyways, I think those have been pretty good. Teaching mental game is tough because it can definitely sound like gobbledygook if it's not done right. But I think I wouldn't do it if I didn't believe in the value that I provide. So, okay, slumps. There's something, we have ideas of how things work and how we want them to work. And those ideas aren't always reality. And that's where the frustration comes in. So when I think about the stories that people tell themselves, there's a word I want to talk about, which is really, you talk about ego, but it's about control. It's about who's in control. And I think that one of the things that attracts people to pool, and I thought about this too, like you do coding and stuff. My son was really into coding. Well, in life, we're not in total control. There's other people that we don't get to control. And whether or not, we have a boss that's a good boss or a bad boss, or whether or not, there's just so many things that are out of our control. And so when we go to play pool, it's like one of the fun parts is that we get to condense the universe to these little 4 rails. And that within this little microverse, we get to kind of like be in total control of where the balls go. And we want to be in control of all this stuff. So our goal is to maximize and to learn to control this game as best we can. We want to control the pocketing, control the cue ball, make good decisions and patterns, and learn to exert higher and higher levels of control over the results on the table. That's kind of our goal of being a pool player. The hard part is that we aren't in total control. And so there's the serenity prayer, which is, give me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. By the way, shout out to Nir from Israel. Hey, Nir. So, okay. So here's the problem. This is not just a pool thing. This is a life thing. We want to be in control of things that we aren't always in control of. So let me give you an example. And the ego comes in because the ego is the part of us that generally wants to be in control. So we tell ourselves stories about how it's going to work and how we're going to get better. And I'm going to do this, and I am going to get this result, and here's how it's going to go. So for example, with a slump, we might be playing poorly. So the ego, the controlling part of us, tells a story and says, the story goes like this. I'm at a slump. So what I am going to do is I am going to observe what I'm playing and the mistakes I'm making, and I will figure out why I'm making those mistakes. And then I will make adjustments to my game and eliminate those mistakes so that I get the results that I want when I want them, and then I don't have to go through that slump anymore. That's how it's going to go. I've decided. Well, it's like, cool story, bro. So if that story was true, then we would get out of that slump and never play bad again. But here's the thing. I've played 30 years of pool. And let me ask you this, Chris. How long have you played pool? 20, 25 years?
About 25 years, yeah.
Okay. Have you ever gone through ups and downs in your games? Like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, did you ever go through ups and downs in your pool game?
I mean, absolutely.
And you've still gone through ups and downs over the last month? Have you ever gotten to the point where it was no more ups and downs and it was just kind of smoothed out? You're like, you got your fundamentals figured out, you figured out what you were doing wrong, and now you just got it to where there's no more downs?
I would say that 20 some odd years, or 13, 14 years ago or whatever, I can look back and go, well, I wasn't as knowledgeable as I am now. So all of those slumps make sense. Whereas as I'm more educated and more nurtured into the game, one comment that I saw earlier was, I'm doing all of the same things that I've been doing that have got me to the point, but then all of a sudden, like everything just stopped working. And then that was the part that was just so puzzling to me, to where it's like, I don't feel, or I don't think I'm doing anything different. So why am I missing shots that I have, that I can assert that I should have a 90 to 95% chance of making, but I'm missing, so for whatever reason.
So the answer to my question is, he's still going through ups and downs in his pool game, and so am I. And I would challenge the chat. Has anyone in the chat? So if the story is, I'm going to figure out what I'm doing wrong, and if it's something fundamental, then I'm going to figure it out. And I'm going to fix it fundamentally. And if there's something with whatever it is, I'm going to troubleshoot it. I'm going to figure it out so it doesn't break down anymore. And then I'll just not slump anymore, and I'll just not do that. It's like, guess what? Everybody dogs it. And we just saw Federer Gorst play in the finals of the U.S. Open against Ko Ping Chung. And Federer played a bad set. And it was like, I was watching him play and live, and I was like, man, he's really struggling. And it's like, Federer, if there's one person who's done everything he can to solve the game, it's like, man, if he can have tough days at the office and just have it not work out, it's like, it happens to everybody. So here's the point. It's unavoidable. And so this slumps are more of that thing that you can't control. It's like, if we put it in the category of having the courage to change it, like, I want the courage to change it. I want to go in and fix this. I'm going to be in charge. It's like, now, not only does that not work, but now you're fighting reality and you're butting your head against the wall, and you're going to be really frustrated because it's not working the way you think it ought to and the way you want it to. And so when I look at slumps, so a great example, like, I played a rough set last night. Chris played a great set. I'm not taking it away, but both were true. I played rough. He played great. But when I played rough, it didn't faze me, because there's no story I'm telling myself that's troubling to me. So my idea of slumps, and nobody's going to like this answer, but here's the truth is, your game's going to do what it do. Your game's going to do what it do, and you're not in control of it. Now, you can influence it, and you can focus on, you can develop your game, but you don't get to you don't get to exert your will and have it work the way you want it to, and have learning work the way you want it to, and all this stuff. So here's an analogy for you. Suppose you were a coach of a little league team, and you had a couple young baseball. Let's say there's a young kid, maybe it was your kid. You have an 8-year-old, and what can you do for that kid? Well, you can show them how to bat. You can practice with them and help them put in hours. You can bring them to the ball games and make sure that they get there in time to warm up and that they have the supplies they need. And you can give them love and support, right? But you can't make them hit the ball, and you can't control whether they strike out or not in that at bat. So let's look at what we can control. It's like, we can control what I said. They're teaching, their hours. You can help them, support them, get them the right equipment, and you can bring them there. Well, as a pool player, you're your own coach. So you are the dad and the 8-year-old. And what you get to do for your pool game is, you can set yourself up for success. You can set yourself up on a developing and learning path where you can bring yourself to the pool table and put in hours. And you could bring yourself to leagues or to tournaments to get yourself competition. And you could go on YouTube and watch educational videos, and you can watch pros play to feed your brain the right images and pick up the image of what you want to steer towards. And you could put in focused practice so that you're putting in hours in areas that are likely to develop your game. And that's what you could do. And then the rate at which you learn, and the level to which you learn at, and how quickly you improve, and how quickly it comes together, and when it comes together, and when it falls back apart, none of that's in your control. That's all out of your control. So it's like, your job as the manager, the thinking, controlling part, is just go down that path that is going to lead to results. Go down the right path, and then let your game do what it do. And it'll come together and fall apart, and come together and fall apart. And every time it comes together, it'll come together 1% better. And every time it falls apart, it'll fall apart. It'll feel like the end of the world, but it's probably 1% better than when you fell apart last time. And that's it. And people really don't like that answer. They really don't, man. They really just say, no, that's not good enough for me. I want to get to where I could just always hit the ball. And it's like, I'm telling you, you could try it. And everybody in the chat, you've been playing pool for years. Nobody's gotten to the part where it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. I'm here to tell you that doesn't work. So the best thing you can do is, as far as getting out of a slump, it's like, you don't get to pick, you don't get to fight your way out of a slump. You just keep going down the right path and let your game do what it do. Now, I have other things I could say, but what are your thoughts about that?
Well, what I really would like you to explain is the part to where when you're playing good and ego starts to climb, and all of a sudden, when you hit some sort of plateau, and then next thing you know, there's that pain and suffering and what ego is trying to get you to do, and then all of a sudden ego disappears. And describe that. That's what really resonated with me when you talked about it. Of course,
I just wanted to kind of get people. Let me tell a quick story first, because I had a gentleman last weekend that trained with me. And he was actually from Spain originally, moved here. I had a really, really good time. Super amazing people I get to work with. And I really want to thank this gentleman for coming out. I had a great time. And we kind of butted heads about one topic. And I couldn't really figure out what the butting heads was, because we're both, I'm a high intensity guy, whatever. But he was anxious about something. And this isn't exactly about slumps, but it's similar. And he was saying that of the things we've worked on A, B, C, D. He said, I know that I've gotten better at A, and I can see that, and I know what to do. And I feel confident that I'm doing it right or doing it better. I'm confident I've learned and improved at B. I'm confident I've learned and improved at C. But D, I'm concerned about, because I feel like, and let's be specific. He was talking about his ability to read tables and play better patterns. And he was saying, like, I think I've got some of the stuff you're talking about, but I'm a little uncertain. That was his actual word. I'm uncertain that I'm going to be able to apply this effectively in games. And that I'm concerned that it might be difficult. Like, there's going to be times when I try to do some different stuff that doesn't work out, or that I'm not sure I'm going to be able to keep developing this on my own the right way, or that I'm going to be able to figure this out. And so this was an interesting spot, because what he basically, if you could boil down what he says, is, I have anxiety about this uncertainty. And really, when you boil it down, to me, that's a fear. Let's call it a fear. I have a fear of my ability to develop and implement improved pattern play. So when that is voiced, you could go one of two different directions as a response to that. One direction you could go down is reassurance and say you have nothing to be afraid of. So let me give you certainty. You are uncertain. And so let me reassure you by telling you, no, it's certain. And here's how it's certain. And there are some reassurances I can give, which is the work we did. I know for a fact that there's simply no way it's not going to improve his patterns because of certain things that we've worked on and certain understandings he has. You just can't unsee certain things. And that it's not fair to say, well, what if there's some time in league when I try to implement some new pattern idea and it doesn't work out? Or because I'm thinking about it so much and then I distract myself and shark myself and it doesn't work. It's like, well, that might happen, but there's also going to be a lot of times where it does work. And so if you compare it to perfect and working every time, it might blow up once in a while. But if you compare it to what you were doing when you came in 2 days ago, it's going to be better than that. So it's like, it's not about perfect, it's about growth. So I can assure him about that. I can also assure him that I have a Facebook group for my graduates where we keep working on patterns, and he's going to keep developing this stuff, and it's going to keep getting better. So I can look at the road ahead and give some reassurance that I am certain that it's going to go the right direction. But there's another answer that he didn't like, or that maybe we disagreed on. When he says, I'm afraid of the uncertainty, one answer is to reassure him and try to convince him that it's certain. But the other answer is to say, what's so scary about uncertainty? Why are we afraid of this? Why are we afraid of this uncertainty? Do we think that it's just never going to happen if we're not in control? And to me, this is about control. The reason it's fearful is I want to be in control of this. And what I was pushing back on him is like, hey, guess what? You're not. Your ability to learn and implement patterns effectively will happen as it happens. And you don't have to, you're just the dad bringing your kid to Little League. Like, you don't have to be the guy that figures it out. You just have to get your kid to the game and let him go through it a little bit. And so if you want to be in control of your brain's ability to recognize and implement patterns, good luck with that. Like, you could come coach with me or come learn from me, and I can help you, and I can lead you down a path that I know will help you grow and develop the right way. But when it's going to work, and if it's going to work next week at leagues, and if it's going to work at that tournament, and if there's going to be bumps along the way, and how quickly you're going to improve, and to what level you're going to improve, and what your Fargo rate's going to do, man, you're not in control of all that. So quit trying. And if there's a fear about that, like, I'm uncomfortable because I'm uncertain. So in short, guys, I can either reassure him that it's certain and you're in control and don't worry, or I can tell him, why are we afraid of being out of control? And what is it? What are you afraid of? And it's like, really, when you boil down that fear, usually that fear comes from something like, if I'm not in control, then it might not ever happen. And if I'm not in control, then how do I know what's going to happen? And what if I always am terrible and I never get any better? And then I'm just stuck and I'm plateaued and I just play bad pool for the rest of my life and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. So now we've got that fear. And we have to do two things. It's useful. Like, what can we control? It's like, well, I don't want that to happen. So I will get coaching and I will practice my patterns and I will think about it and I will lead myself down the path. And then from there, I don't really believe the rest of that crap, because the same way none of us has ever solved the game and avoided slumps, we've also never entered into a slump that's lasted our entire life and we've never played good pool again. So it's like, it's both can't be, both the same thing that makes us laugh will make us cry. It may be hard to accept that we can't control and we might go through slumps as a period of pool. We're going to have bad days. But the good part is the opposite is also true, which is it's always going to turn and we're always going to have good days again. And so with him, I was just like, we don't need to be in control of all this. We can listen to that fear and say, yes, I'm anxious about patterns. I'm fearful about development. So let's do what I can do. Learn, try my best to implement it, and then give myself time, and then just trust that it'll work out, not to the level that my controlling ego would like it to, but that the growth process will happen and it will succeed. And so, in short, he was looking for reassurance, and instead, I was like, why do we need reassurance? Why can't we just trust the process and step back and not have to be in control of every part of it? So that was my thoughts. I just want to read. I don't want to just. That was a lot. I'm going to speak to what you talked about too, but does that make sense? What I was story?
Absolutely, because that to me, that's how I kind of look at myself in regards to where I'm at right now. And when I say, like, I know what I know and I try to implement what I know. And when there's these moments in time to where it's like, there's an arsenal of shots that I have, or tools in my tool shed that you like to say, to where, like, I can almost execute these without any thought.
Mm-hmm.
But then if I can assert that, and then all of a sudden, when I'm faced with that scenario where it's like, wait, this is something I should be able to do without thought, and I execute and it doesn't go according to plan, and maybe I just write that off. Like, okay, that's a one-off. But then it happens again, and then it happens again. And then I'm like, hold up, wait, this was something I thought I had solved. Why am I somehow no longer solving it? Why is my 90% shot all of a sudden turned into a 60% shot?
And the answers to this is because it's not a 90% shot then. It's just like, okay, so I love this comment from Bang Time Pool, so that's really cool. So the funny part is he says, well, agree to a point. If you have played a while, you have obviously been in a slump. You would hope that you would know the best way for you to get out of it and not just let it happen on its own. And what I would say is, first of all, tip of the hat, and everyone's like, listen, nobody has to agree with me. But what I would say is, we actually are completely disagreeing on this point, because this idea of basically what he's saying is, no, I want to be in control of this though. I want to be in control of this. And I ought to be able to fix and get myself out of this slump, because I should be smart enough and talented enough and put in enough work to where I have now equipped myself with the knowledge and the pool savvy and sophistication that I can dig myself out of a slump. And it's like, okay, that's a story that you wish was true. And for me, I can only speak to me and the people I know, is that story has not proven to be true. And so what utility is that story? There's facts and there's stories. Facts are things that we all look at and we all agree on. Stories are things we tell ourselves. And the question is not if they're true or not, but how does that work for you? And my experience is people that tell themselves stories about how they want to be in control, their ego likes the idea of it's being in control. I can get my 8-year-old. My 8-year-old's batting badly, but I can help him. I'm going to get him out of that. It's like, okay, you can tell yourself that story. But then what's going to happen is that you're going to be very frustrated because it doesn't match the reality. And so that just creates more negative emotion. And then you exert more analytical control over your pool game, which your ego is not very effective. And so it's like result-wise, it leads to frustration, control, and sabotages your performance. And it actually makes it worse, not better. And so that's been my experience. And it not only makes the performance worse, it makes the emotions worse. And then the more pressure you put on it, like, I need to get myself out of the slump, the more you tell yourself that, the more pressure you're putting on the outcome of this shot in this match. And then you're actually creating more and more challenges for yourself. Whereas if you just look at it and say, ups and downs, and my job is just to flow through it and let it ride out. Now, that doesn't mean you don't control what you can control. Like I said, that doesn't mean you don't try. That doesn't mean you quit practicing. You have to put in hours. And that may mean that you video record yourself, or that you practice some simple shots, and you may explore, in an objective way. Am I moving my body around? And you might, of course, you're still going to practice and you're still going to work on your game, but you're doing it with kind of a detached, minimalist kind of way, as opposed to I'm going to fix this because I'm me and I know how to fix stuff. That's all.
No, absolutely, because that's pretty much where it was for me. To where, like I said, all I can do now is hope that whatever it is that I discovered, I'm going to obviously experiment with it, keep trying and see what it does. And then when I iron it all out, I'll hopefully do some sort of presentation about it to tell you what it's all about, to see if I'm truly starting to come out of my slump, and then see where it actually ends up taking. So before we go on, I saw a couple of questions. I'm going to go ahead and try to answer. I'm actually using a new feature because I've actually queued up some of the questions that I saw go by, so that way I don't have to continue scrolling around the chats to find them. So let's see how this works. So the first question that I think we're going to try to answer, let's see here. This is from Toxic 8-Ball. Like I said, you and Nate reviewed his 8-ball match a few years ago. It says, while I know this is individually based, but as a 550 Fargo trying to reach 600, how would you recommend breaking down your game to make that jump to find what needs improvement? How would you answer that?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to grow from 550 to 600 and beyond. So congratulations on getting to that level, by the way. That's a very fine game of pool. So one way, of course, is time and competition. Competition is a great blacklight to show you where you're weak. So let me explain what's really important. Let me give you a couple questions to ask to help assess this. The other thing is coaching. Of course, I'm great, 550, trying to get to 600, like I'm your guy. But coaching is only one path, and you can get there on your own through competition and analysis. So there's two questions I think are important to ask. So one question that's by itself not a very good question to ask is, am I bad at something? Or do I wish I was better at something? So for the problem with that question is, I pretty much wish I was better at everything. Chris, do you agree? Does everyone agree?
Absolutely.
Okay. So if we wish we were better at everything, then, or if we feel like we should be better at everything, or there's everything we could get better at. So it's like, well, okay, does that really help us? Not really. Or, if we miss a ball, we're like, man, I wish I didn't miss that ball. I'm just going to practice this ball till I don't miss anymore. It's like, well, we wish we made every ball more often, and there's no shot we'll ever practice to where we don't miss it anymore. So that's not a good guide. So the two questions I like to ask are, how big of a skill gap is there between me and the people I'm aspiring to in this area? And how often does it come up? So for example, you want to be 600. So you obviously are playing against guys that are 6, 620, 650, whatever. When you miss a shot or struggle with something, for example, let's just suppose you're frozen off rails. It's kind of an Achilles heel. You don't like shooting frozen off rails, and you feel like your accuracy is poor, especially shooting, from long range. Okay. Then you can ask yourself, I understand I don't like shooting off rails, and I feel like I struggle off rails shooting shots from distance. But how do the guys I compete against handle that? Are they just spearing them in like they're easy and they're making them at 90%? I'm making them at 50%? Is there really a big skill gap in that area, or do they find that pretty tough too? Because if if there is a big skill gap, and like for whatever reason, when you're frozen on a rail, you're like 50-50 to make this shot, whereas most people are 80-90%. Well, then that's useful. You could be like, man, that's a big gap. But if it's an area where the guys you're gunning for are struggling there too, well, then maybe that's not where the leak is. The other question about how often does it come up is that even if there is a big skill gap between you and those 600s, if it's a shot that comes up like once a month or once a year, well, then that's just not really going to make a big impact to your bottom line results. So for me, the areas that you want to hit are areas that come up frequently where there is a skill gap between you and the guys you're gunning for. So you can't just think about what do I want to get better at. You got to think about what are the things that come up set after set, game after game, where I can see the guys that I'm just as good at shot making as they are, and I'm just as good at breaking as they are, and I'm just as good at safeties as they are. But for some reason, when it comes to this type of, cue ball patterns or this type of, spinning the cue ball, those guys can do stuff that I find like to be trick shots and I can't do it, and they can do it a little bit more reliably. Well, then that tells you this comes up a lot and there's a skill gap. And I think those are two really good questions to focus on. But my guess would be at a 550 level, my guess would be some of the things that I'm going to be working on with Chris over the next few days, which is going from vertical axis, low ball, center ball type hits and full hits and kind of stunning and punching balls around to getting thinner hits, more finesse, and adding side spin. That's what I found just in general at the 550 level is we gotta introduce a little bit more side spin and a little bit more finesse and spin into the game. People at the 550 level tend to be a little bit full punchy type hits. So,
all right. So Toxis, I hope that helps you out. Let's see here. Let's move on to the next question. This comes from Eric Croft. How's it going? I actually met Eric Croft in person when I was in Vegas. It says, what are some ways you can maximize practice routines when you have very little time to practice? I would almost want to just recant what you just said, really. Like, I think that's really it. Because generally when I hear or when I see questions like that, or the how to improve type of thing is what Demetrius said, that I can sum up to where it's like, if you can acknowledge what you're weak at, to where not necessarily to where it's a particular shot, but maybe a particular move that you have to execute during that shot. And like I said, how often does that shot plus that move have to come up? Because there's a difference between making a ball and transitioning to the next shot. You might be able to take that ball and make it, 50+%, but now add the move to it, and all of a sudden it drops to like 25. And then you want to add the move and put it back up to 50% and then try to push it beyond 50%. So I always say, like, acknowledge what you know and acknowledge what you don't know. And then typically in competition, you want to stick to your guns and use what you know how to do with high degree of confidence. And there are probably very rare occasions and exceptions to where it's like, crap, I have to go for this low percent thing that I know that I have a hard time doing. And like you said, it's like, if you know you're going to go for it, you shouldn't be surprised if you mess up, but it's going to be a huge confidence builder if you clearly nail it, like in that pivotal moment, which clearly means you're not ready for it. You just happen to execute it at the appropriate time. And then if you go off that scenario and back to the practice table and try it again, you might find out that you, for some reason, just can't hit it ever again. And you'll actually find out that you have to actually work on it. So with short amount of time, I would basically say, let's try to gather up the things that you know that you're having trouble with, not necessarily making a shot. Because like I said, I do consider those two separate things, making a shot and making a move. And if you can make the shot, fine. But if you can't make the shot and make the move at the same time, that's what you're going to want to try to practice on, especially like Demetrius said, if it's one that you see that comes up frequently in your game. Don't really practice on the infrequent things that come up in your game, like how often do you have to jump over 2 or 3 balls in a match? And that's what you're going to all of a sudden practice on. You put hours and hours of practice in, and you go to a tournament and you never have to execute that shot.
Or something everyone, like I've had students set up like a long rail, end rail to end rail bank where I'm frozen on the end rail on the 9 ball. And they're like, what would you do if you're here on the 9? I'm like, probably lose. Like, I don't know, like, why are we talking about this? Like, if we play a set, I'm not winning sets off you because I make that ball a lot more than you. That's just not where the leaks are. My answer to this question would be, I like to do, there's a balance between how controlling and analytical we get, where we don't want to be thoughtless, and just hit balls lackadaisically and without direction. But we also don't want to be over controlling and like, nah, nah, nah. And, you know, some people are really into like spreadsheets and I'm going to hit 100 balls like this and whatever works for you. But for me, here's a rhythm that's a nice balance. I do what I call core drill, core skill, hit balls. So I do a core drill for 15 minutes. I have certain drills that I've identified that target areas of the game I want to work on. And I do 50, like there's a layout that I'll share with you guys. That's a 5-ball run. And I'll do that one 10 times and see if I can do it 10 times. I did 8 in a row last time and I choked. And then the last 2 I died it. But anyway, 8 out of 10 is my best. But someday I'm going to get 10 out of 10. So I'll do that drill. It takes about 15 minutes. And then I'll work on a certain skill. It sounds similar. There's a little difference for me. I work on some whatever. So I do a core drill for 15 minutes, work on a skill for 15 minutes, and then I just hit balls and play Ghost for a while. I do about an hour practice session for me. Any longer than that, I have a hard time focusing. So I put it an hour. I do a drill, a skill, and then I hit balls because a couple reasons why I hit balls. One is that playing the game and just putting it together and playing straight pool and playing Ghost and running racks, putting it all together in game flow is just as important as breaking down the pieces, is smoothing it out in actual kind of working on your rhythm, working on your actual play and running racks. But the other part is it's got to be fun because the more fun if you keep your practice sessions lightweight, focused, intense, but light and fun, then you'll put in more of them and you can keep doing it. Whereas if you're like, I am going to take total control and make this, if you try to like really exert a lot of control of will, you can grind like that for a few hours, for a few days, but you're not going to keep that up. I don't know, you know, for extended periods of time. And it's going to be out of balance on the control side. So that's my rhythm. Core drill, core skill practice, 15, 15, 30.
Awesome. Eric, I hope that helps you out, bud. Before we go on to the next question, I do want to highlight this. Toxis 8-Ball, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. So he's appreciating the answer
Awesome.
that we gave him. So I really do appreciate that, bud. All right, next question. This comes from Ben H. I saw some chats go on to where this was kind of being answered for you, but we'll still take it on. It says, any tips on figuring out how to not drop my elbow? I start to drop it when the tip is about 1 inch from the cue ball. I'm a 7 and an 8-ball and in 9-ball, or I'm a 7 and 8 in 9-ball. So I guess that's a 7 and 8-ball and an 8 in 9-ball, I think is what you're meaning by that. And you could still draw, but could be more consistent with a pendulum stroke. My initial answer is probably, if you know you're dropping your elbow before you even get to the cue ball, your bridge length is too long. The elbow drop is basically, your follow through is also too long. I mean, think about it. If I just hold my arm up like this, right? My elbow can't move as long as I stick to the restriction of whatever my ligament allows me to do. So my follow through, or here's my backswing and here's my follow through. And that's it. That's all I can do. In order for me to go further, I have to start doing this. It's just physical limitations. There's no way. So if you ever see when professionals drop their elbow, look how long their follow through, look how far their cue goes through that cue ball. That's the only explanation there is. Is there anything wrong with an elbow drop? Well, no, except for what you just described. You don't want your stick moving right before you hit the cue ball. That's how you scoop the cue ball off the table. That's how you miscue or whatever. Once you're done with contact, I mean, it's game on. The cue ball has already left the tip of your cue. Like, I mean, who cares? It's just that the common phrase we hear is timing. Is when is the acceleration of your stroke at its peak to where you know you're delivering the maximum amount of power that you intend to put on this particular shot? And that's going to deal with, you know, whatever physical limitation you're going to have. Certain people are going to hit balls harder than you, and certain people aren't going to be able to hit balls as hard as you. That's one physical limitation that we do have in this game, is people can do what they do based on their physical limitations that they have. So if you're dropping your elbow before you even get to the cue ball, I would suspect your bridge length is a little too far. You need to go ahead and scoot up a little bit to where you know you can get to the set position, which should look like this, where you basically have almost a 90-degree angle between your shoulder, elbow, and your grip hand, and your tip hasn't moved one bit. That would be my advice.
Yeah, or you could back up an inch on your grip. But the other thing I'd say is one question I always ask, and this is the same question I ask when people are getting unwanted spin on the cue ball, is, does this happen on every shot, or does this happen on some shots? And I think that's a big difference, because when people are getting unwanted spin, let's say they're shooting a cut shot down the rail from the middle of the table, and every time they shoot it, they're putting a little bit of outside English on it. A lot of times it's because they get down too thick and then they're just trying to swivel their aim over to aim it thinner, and then they're shifting their tip. So if they were to think to themselves, maybe I'm not seeing the center of the cue ball correctly. I'm like, wait a second. I've seen you shoot stop shots, your cue ball's not spinning. I've seen you shoot other shots, your cue ball's not spinning. It's only on this one shot. So it's not some I can't see the center of the cue ball thing. That would be the wrong diagnosis. Similarly here, if you're dropping your elbow and your tip's coming up on every shot, then that would be what Chris is saying is probably right. But you mentioned draw, and so if it's only on power draws, then it's like, well, maybe there's a different fix. And so here's what I found is that in general, when people want to draw the ball a long way or from distance, it requires a lot of power. And so when people are trying to generate power, this also happens on the break shot and when you try to force a ball. Your brain says, oh, I need to hit this hard. And then that results in some tensing up, some shoving the cue, and some body movement. And the elbow drop oftentimes happens in the brain's effort to try to help get the power you think you need. The problem is when you start dropping your elbow, as you drop your elbow, the tip comes up and you actually hit higher on the cue ball, which kills any draw action you get. And you're talking about this. So I'm actually going to do a session here over the next couple of days. This is actually something I was going to work on. So I will give you a preliminary, there's two things I do with draw that I think are really cool. And one thing is that I've actually had tremendous success with just the last couple of months. Instead of working on, if you pocket an object ball and just try to draw it back a long way, because you're setting all your object ball, the object ball is taking all the cue ball speed. And it goes to the pocket. And so you don't have any idea how hard you're hitting that ball. And you might be hitting that ball with way too much muscle and you don't even know it. So what I've been doing is I put an object ball on the kitchen line, like not necessarily on the spot, but like on the kitchen line. And I put the cue ball on the other kitchen line. So you got two, second diamond to second diamond, 4 diamonds in between. Like if you're shooting a stop shot from where you break from to the object ball on the spot. And I shoot stop shots. And my goal is to shoot a stop shot where that object ball hits end rail, end rail, end rail, and back to the 4th rail. 4 rail speed, and sometimes even 4.5 rail speed. So very firm, crisp stops. And what I do is I really try to get that so that I can generate 4 to 4.5 rail speed smoothly, without tensing, without muscle, without shoving, and just using kind of a good timing and a good flow. And once I start getting that 4 to 4.5 rail speed with a crisp stop, where it feels like my muscles and my shoulder aren't tight, I'm not jumping up and lunging, I'm just letting my cue swing, then I start lowering my tip and doing the same thing with a lower tip. And instead of focusing on drawing my cue ball back to the end rail, I just focus on lowering my tip and using that same, just keeping the same relaxed delivery through a lower part of the cue ball. And all I focus on is driving the object ball 4 rails. And what ended up happening is on my 9-foot table at home, I started drawing all the way to the end rail and back out effortlessly. And I will tell you, it was about half the speed that I was trying to use when I was pocketing balls. When I was trying to do the mighty X drill and fire the ball in the corner, I was using too much muscle, too much power. And so when I started, the reason why instead of pocketing the ball, when you watch that ball bank up and down the table, it will shine a light on how much power and muscle you're actually using. And if you limit yourself, so instead of telling yourself, I'm going to hit this as hard as I can to make it come back, like, no, I'm allowed 4 rail speed. That's the speed I'm capped at. So now let's be smooth and accurate at that speed. Turns out that is all the speed you need. And so, Chris, when we were done playing, I hit a few draw shots. You saw me hit some draw shots. Like, I'm hitting my draw shots way softer than I used to with way less effort. And I'm getting really good results. So I'm going to share this with you guys on the table with a video over the next couple of days.
I can testify that when we were done with our set, and mind you, I have an 8-foot table, but to me, that's not even relevant. When I'm watching Demetrius execute these draw shots and I listen to the hit, which doesn't sound very impactful, like there's a lot of power behind it. But when I watch that cue ball peel out in place and then all of a sudden take off, and I'm like, you didn't even hit it that hard. Like, you hit it clean, so clean that the cue ball reacts the way that it reacts. And it was just amazing. So I'm definitely look forward to that.
Yeah, so Ben, keep posted. We're going to do a segment on draw.
Okay, let's see here. I'm going to take a couple more and then we're going to go into another. We're not going to try to skip questions, but we're going to do a couple more and then we're going to go into the next topic on top of that. So this is from Joseph Smith. It says, can you give me advice on being able to focus throughout the whole match? Always start out great and then can't finish the match out at the same pace. I'm going to basically say, well, what does that mean at the same pace? Like, is it really your focus? Because if you're telling me that you're in a match, this is what I'm interpreting here. You're telling me that you're in a match and you're ready to go. You're ready to destroy your opponent. And halfway through your match, you're like, I don't care if I win or not. And if that's really the case, to where that's what your pace change really means, then the simple fix is obviously don't do that. But at the same time, I would also question, like, what do you think is actually happening to you, in your head or internally, that causes you to do that? Because if you're in competition, you would think you want to win your competition, like, really. And of course, everybody has, different mindsets, to where it's like, you start off in a tournament, halfway through the tournament, I don't want to be here, I want to go home. So maybe it's something like that. But in general, I would typically think, yeah, the way you start should be the way that you finish, unless you're telling me you're getting bored in your competition, and that kind of changes your attitude. Like, what do you think?
Well, I think it's going to go into that competitor cycle, which somebody had asked. They said they wanted to hear about that. So I think that I'm going to tie that question into the competitor cycle.
Okay.
I think that's a good example.
Okay.
Yeah. So there was one other one. You scroll up? There was a comment here. I know it's a little scroll, but there was another one from Cecil. Not that one. Keep going. I thought there was another one from Cecil up above. I just want to make sure, because I can't.
Let me see if I can find it.
Maybe I'm wrong. Okay, I don't want to spend too long searching. I might be wrong. Okay,
but go ahead and answer this while I look for it.
Let me go back, and I want to talk about the competitor cycle that you were asking me about. You wanted me to share this, and
then you're talking about. I think I know it wasn't from Cecil. I know exactly what you're talking about. Where is it? Because I think it's probably the next question that's queued up, and that's this. Can we get to Little Chris's question about ego?
From Hector. Okay,
yeah, that's actually the next question.
Okay, so these tie together. So guys, get ready, take a deep breath. Let's regroup. I've been doing podcasts for 4 years with Nate Mindham on the Cue It Up Network, and I've never gone into this because it's something I do with my mental game coaching. It's hard to encapsulate in this format. So I've practiced this long enough. I believe I can do it. So but you're going to have to meet me halfway. So here it is. I call this the competitor cycle, and this is not my invention. This is simply some things I've been taught from other players, things I've learned from mental game books, and things I've learned from my own personal experience, and a lot of journaling and reflection. But over the years, I've built a model in my head of what's going on. That how it works is, and it involves the cycle from playing good to playing bad to playing good to playing bad. So the beginning of the cycle is something I call the beginner's mind. We've heard of the beginner's mind. What are the attitudes we should have when we're trying to learn and develop ourselves? And one big key is humility. We are humble. When we're a beginner, we have humility. We know, I'm just learning. Ha ha ha. Look at me. I'm trying to play pool. And there's three things about that. That I think constitute the beginner's mind. Well, I suppose humility, I already said, but no expectations. We have no expectations. If you played a game you've never played before, like if you've never played snooker on a 6x12 or 3-cushion billiards or something, you'd be like, oh man, I've never played this before. I don't really expect much. Secondly, we're very process focused. We're not like, oh, I know what I'm going to get. I know I'm going to try to get a 10. It's like, well, I just want to figure out what do I need to do to try to even give myself a chance to play this game. And let's just focus on trying to do that and see what happens. No expectations and a process focus. And the third thing is we enjoy adversity. We enjoy the adversity. Like the whole point we're playing is because this game is tough and we want to challenge ourselves. So, this 3-cushion, I've never played it before. This is a fun. I'm going to try to go 5 rails. I don't know if I can do it. Not only don't I know if I can do it, but it's going to be fun to try. And it's hard, but it's exciting hard. It's fun hard. So humility, process focused, no expectations, enjoying adversity. That's a good state of mind. And when you have that good state of mind, good things happen. So then the good things start happening. And then little by little, as those good things happen, the ego starts paying attention to those good things and says, look at this. I'm a good player. Because there's two ways you can enjoy pool, everybody. You can enjoy the testing yourself against the adversity in the moment and kind of like allowing that adversity to bring you into the here and now and enjoy that kind of meditative Zen experience. That's one way to enjoy the game. The other way to enjoy the game is to indulge in ego fantasy and start telling yourself stories about how significant and important and special you are and how awesome you are, and listen and replaying compliments that you got or how that person must have thought of you when you made that shot. And that's all like ego is just building up this fictional image of yourself and then basking in your reflection of you create this fictional picture of yourself that you like to think, and then you sit there and gaze at it adoringly and pat yourself on the back. That's what that is. So in the beginning, you don't have any ego because you're like, I haven't done anything. Why would I have an ego? But then as you start getting good results and people start giving you compliments and all these nice things, all of a sudden you're like, well, look at that. Look at that. That's pretty good. And then the problem is that now you want to enjoy that. But now when you go to the pool table the next day, and there's two other comments that talked about this. One person mentioned a comment, this is the one I was looking for, about missing shots they feel they should make, missing shots they know they should make, missing shots they know they should make, or not playing at the level they know they should play at. I think it was Cecil's comment. And then there was another comment about I lost it. But anyway, the problem is now when we go to the pool table, we're no longer in the beginner's mind looking to enjoy our challenge. Now we are looking to prove that this fictional character, the superhero we built ourselves up to be in our mind, we're looking to demonstrate our skills and our prowess at pool so that we continue to receive compliments and replay good shots. And we're looking to recreate and worship at our own altar a little bit. And the problem is that now that leads to image management. Now we're looking for image preservation. We're looking to preserve our own self-image. And that all of a sudden we become very result oriented because we need to win to preserve that. And we have very high expectations and we become resentful of adversity. And so I'm going to zoom in on this, exactly how this plays out. So we go from beginner's mind, no expectations, humility, process oriented, and enjoying adversity. We start getting great results. And then we want to continue to get those results and pat ourselves on the back about how awesome we are. And so that ties into this whole thing about when somebody says, I'm not playing at the level, I'm not playing the way I'm supposed to, or I'm not playing the way I know I play. It's like, to me, it's like, yes, you do. Yes, you are. If that's how you're playing, that's actually how you play. The issue is not how you play. The issue is it doesn't match up to this fantasy you built. Your ego is bigger than your britches. You're getting a little big for your britches. And I tell somebody, I remember telling somebody they were playing and they posted on AZ Billiards. I post there a lot. And they were talking about how frustrated they were. This one person mentioned they wanted to sell their cues because they were in a slump or something. And they had posted about how they were in this league match and they kept missing the 8-ball. They ran out 2 racks. And they missed 2 8-balls. They couldn't believe it. And finally on the hill, even as bad as they played, they came down to 1 ball and they did their process and the good stroke and whatever. And it didn't go. And they were like ready to sell their cues. And I told them, I said, the problem is, sorry, it says a little tough. He's just trolling. Okay. You're typing a comment. No problem. Yeah. So here's what I told him, Chris. I said to him, when was the day that you graduated yourself to being a good player with a capital G? So I say there's good players. Like I'm a good player with a lowercase G. Like I can play the game. I'm not pretending I don't know how to play the game at all. But there's something that people do where they think they become a good player. Maybe it's that first day they ran 50 balls at straight pool or 3 racks at 8-ball. Maybe it's that first day they won that weekly tournament and beat that guy in the finals that had always beat him before. But they did something, and sometime in their mind, they're like, you know what? I'm no longer a beginner. I'm a good player. I'm a good player now. So they've decided I'm a good player. And as making that decision, there's a certain set of entitlements that come from being a good player. As a good player, I have decided in my mind that good players don't miss the 8-ball. and that good players don't choke, and that good players can beat lower rated players whenever they want. And I am one of them. So they have this whole package of expectations that comes along with good player status, and they've decided that they are a good player. So they've built this image of who they think they are as a good player and a set of expectations that they are allowed. Now, as a good player, I no longer have to be the guy that shows up and tries to play and deal with adversity and loses and suffers. Now I can be the guy that shows up and shows everybody how great pool is. It collects my wins. It collects my adoration. Well, that doesn't work. So that leads to, like I said, expectations, result-oriented, resenting adversity. Because all of a sudden, guys, all of a sudden you're in that state of mind and you get a tough shot and you're no longer thinking, oh boy, that's going to be fun to take on. You're like, I just want my win so I can be awesome and enjoy being awesome. And this shot is in between me and that win that I need to continue to pat myself on the back. And when your opponent misses and hooks you, instead of thinking, oh, okay, this is a good time to try that new kick system, this is going to be fun to see if I can get this hit, you're like, oh, of course the guy would hook me. He should have left me a shot so I could collect my win and be awesome. And so that state of mind leads to three things: fear, self-loathing, and anger. And so it comes from fear, a fear of exposure. You've got this fictional image of yourself and you don't want it to be exposed as false. You're really attached to that. So you're afraid that it's going to crumble because you know it isn't true. You know it isn't true, or you wouldn't be afraid. Hint, if you're afraid, whatever you're afraid of losing, it's not true. Otherwise you wouldn't be afraid. So like if you go to alcohol, if you buy alcohol, if you're over 21 and they're going to ask for an ID, do you get afraid? No, because you know you're 21. But if you're 19 with a fake ID, you might be nervous because you know it's bull. So it's like, if you're scared, then it ain't true. The second part is self-loathing. Your ego, you demand more from yourself. You expect more from yourself. And so you start really hating on yourself for not being the player you think you ought to be. And then the third part about anger. So anger and self-loathing are close. It's anger at yourself or just anger at the world. And how come he missed and left me this? And this is ridiculous. And by the word should. I should have made that. I shouldn't have missed that. I should be up 4-1 right now. He shouldn't have won that set. I should do this. And I should be able to pull myself out of a slump. And I should. It's like, cool story, bro. Big ego you got there. You really think you got this solved. So what happens is people get into that mindset, and that leads to fear, frustration, and self-loathing, which leads to totally bad performances. And it's painful as all hell. And you continue to go through it. And the pain that you go through, when we build up that false image, whatever ego we build up on that one side, reality burns it to the ground. Reality will expose it and burn it to the ground. And the pain we feel is that ego burning to the ground and coming back to earth. And that may sound tough. It's humiliating. Humiliation. It's humiliating. I can't believe that a player like me would play this bad. Like me and my expectations. But after it's all burned to the ground and there's nothing left, and you surrender. So humiliation sounds like a bad thing. I'm being humiliated. But that leads back to humility, which is where we ought to be. So humility, process-oriented, no expectations, enjoying adversity leads to great results. And then the ego creeps in, starts basking in its own glory and creating all these stories about what we could do as a great player. And then that leads to fear of exposure, and it leads to high expectations, result-oriented thinking, and lots of resenting adversity and being miserable about how tough the game is. Because now it's no longer, before it was, I'm creating the finish line. I'm playing a race to 9. I don't really care about 9. I just care about creating a course where I can enjoy testing myself. Now it's, the course is in between me and that 9 that I need to get to basket my win. So, and then that leads to fear, frustration, self-loathing, ultimately terrible performances and humiliation and frustration and pain, which leads back to humility, which is generally when we can start playing. Because as the ego gets involved in pool and tries to get what it wants, it just doesn't work well. So at a high level, that is the competitor cycle. Now, to take that to this question about starting the match strong and then falling apart. And it can work both ways. So if somebody's starting the match strong, they might be in a good state of mind when they start. Because in the beginning of the match, they're like, I don't know if I can win or not. No expectations. I don't know if I have what it takes to win this match. I don't know if I can win. I'm nervous. I don't know if I can even play good right now because I'm nervous and I'm up against a good player and I don't know. So let's just try my hardest and see what happens. Hey, pretty good state of mind. So all of a sudden they start playing well. And then all of a sudden they're up like 4-0, 5-0. And then the ego creeps in and says, see how good you're playing? You're playing awesome. I guess you can handle the pressure. I guess you do have what it takes to win the set. And now you're up 4-0 and 5-0. You've proven that you're playing good. You've proven that you're going to win the set. You've proven you're the better player. So now just keep doing that. And then we should just beat this guy 9-0. And from here on out, we've shown that we can handle this. And so now just keep doing this. And this is awesome. Now I've shifted to where now I'm just going to sit back and enjoy how awesome I am as I cruise over this guy. And all of a sudden, the expectations creep in, which is it should keep going this way. And I've already won this set. And now for the rest of the set, I'm just going to kind of enjoy everybody applauding my runouts and how amazing I'm playing. And all of a sudden, if that mindset can shift in the middle of the match because we start getting attached to the way things are going in the first half of the match. And so to me, that's a sign that we are getting pulled. So one way that I would recognize that is when I start thinking that is I would be like, okay, I'm up 4-0, 5-0, and I find myself but I know that when you're up 5-0 to race to 9, it's not just technically, oh, he can come back and it's not over till it's over. No, that's not what the issue is. The issue is the challenge when you're up 5-0 is not just winning the match. The challenge is not getting sucked into your ego. So I might, if I started thinking things like that, I might think to myself, hey, I realize that the match is going well and it's likely I'll win it. But now the challenge in the beginning was playing my game and handling the pressure and trying to compete with this guy. But now I'm dealing with the challenge of not getting sucked into my ego. So that's really the battle that's going on right now. So, and that's a tough one. And I don't know if I can win it or not. So let's try and realize that even if you're up 8-0, where you feel like even if you play bad, I mean, you're probably going to get the set. But it's like, that's not the challenge anymore. Now the challenge is not getting sucked down this other rabbit hole of your mindset and try to continue to do what got you there. And so if you're aware of that pitfall, the same thing can happen in reverse, where you can start the match really weak and then catch a gear. And this is actually when we were talking about playing out of slumps, a lot of times the ego is the very controlling part. The ego wants to control. And so in the beginning of a set, the ego is like, make sure you do what you did in practice and make sure you do your routine and make sure you aim that ball right and make sure you win this rack and make sure you make this ball. And the ego is like, it's like the dad at Little Leagues that's shouting at the kid at plate, like, no, pull your bat back and make sure you swing higher. Don't do that and don't do this. And so as long as that ego is involved, your performance is poor. And then at some point you get down 3-0, 4-0, 5-0, nothing works and you're being humiliated. You're going through all that. And at some point you kind of surrender and you stop caring. And they call it give up stroke, where you're just like, well, it looks like I'm going to lose. And I guess I don't know how to play after all. And if I ever thought I knew how to play this game, I guess I'm wrong. So I'll just, whatever, I don't care, but I'll just keep hitting balls. And now, because you're back in that beginner's mindset, a lot of times you end up playing good the second half and making big comebacks and playing really well. And the irony is then at that point, then the ego creeps back in and says, see what I did for you? So I love this competitor mindset that I just walked through. People can go through that cycle in a single rack. It can change in a shot, or it can play out over months. And as a competitor, we go through the cycle again and again and again. And so when this happens, what it's about is, one, little by little, you learn how to get back to the beginner's mind a little bit more quickly. You don't stop going through the cycle, but number one, maybe you can get back to the beginner's mindset more quickly. And number two, even when you can't, and even when you're slumping, it's not the end of the world, because this is the journey of a competitor. And if you want to be a competitor, you are going to go through this. And so if you have this story about how I shouldn't go through this, and the ego, by the way, is telling the story, I should be good enough to not have to go through this cycle. And the ego might even be saying, okay, great, now I know about this competitor cycle. Now how can I use that knowledge to transcend it and not go through that anymore? It's like, no. You're going to go through this. But now when you go through this, and you go through that humiliation and that pain and that suffering, I said this in my mental game coaching, is something I really love. On a pain scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being like a slap on the wrist and a 10 being hell, going through the downside of that spiral where everything's bad on a pool table is only a 2. It's the stories that we tell ourselves about it and believing those stories that becomes a 9. So I played a rough set last night, Chris. totally didn't bother me. I was just happy to be here hitting balls with you. And yeah, it's not what I wanted. And I wasn't thrilled with the way I was performing. And I was, trying to get back on track. But it didn't bother me because I go through that every Tuesday. It's just cool. But it's when we start saying it should be some other way and I should be in control. It's the ego whining that makes it a 9. The actual experience isn't that bad. So at a high level, that's the competitor cycle. That's how I feel about trying to control things. And I would recommend people to go back and listen to that clip again because this is an abbreviated version for but I think it's useful to understand. So.
And like all I want to add on that is because like he pretty much almost repeated everything that he said last night. And I'm sitting in one of my chairs that I have here in this room listening to that. And I literally feel like I'm looking in a mirror because I honestly think like that's what I was doing to myself. I look at myself as I'm currently a 636 or 637 Fargo rated player. I'm a 7 and 8 ball and a 9 and 9 ball on the APA scale. And, I've been trying to run 100 balls in straight pull for almost 2 years. I've currently capped out at, I need to watch the video one more time to make sure, but my last personal best that I reported, and I have a video on it, is 86. I actually think I have an 87 now. One more better, but I need to watch the footage again one more time and actually verify it. But all this while, I sit there and look at myself and go, I've been playing for 25 years, and then I start creating these expectations. Should it take me almost 2 years to run 100 balls? And, even though when I first started 2 years ago, I didn't have the knowledge of straight pull that I have now, and there's still more that I have to obtain as I go along. And everything that he describes to the point to where I'm missing what I perceive to be high percent shots and, and the expectation of how I think I'm supposed to play and like all of it. I'm just sitting there like, golly, I'm literally staring at a mirror. And I need to really rethink myself and turn myself back into this process-oriented mind and not result-oriented mind, which is going to lead into one of our next topics that I want to also talk about.
Yeah, and it's like, and there's some things it's hard to let go, but it's like in the end, guys, if I had like 10 seconds to simplify it, you're not as good as you think. The game is harder than you think, and it's going to happen when it happens on its own time schedule. And the more you try to change it, a guy told me this great story one time. I love it. So here it is. This guy was searching for enlightenment. And so he goes to this, monastery and he goes to find some guru and he says, hey, I want to achieve enlightenment. And I hear that this place, whatever. He's like, how long would it take for me to become enlightened? And the guy says, 10 years. And he was really dismayed. He says, 10 years. Oh, man. He's like, well, listen, he's like, that's a long time. But tell you what, you don't know me. Like, when I work on something, I'm really committed. And I'm going to sit here and I'll do anything you tell me to. And I'll train and I'll do it long hours. And I'll really work hard. If I really put in 100, like, how long? The guy says, 20 years. And it was basically, as it continues, where it's like, no. The harder we try and to control and own and it's like, yeah, no. You're going further away. You're going further away from it. And actually, this just leads to another thought, which is about like meditation. That's I think is really interesting with the egos, because the ego is very. Somebody asked, "What's the good of the ego?" Or they asked, "Why is it so hard to snap out of being cocky?" Like, listen, I'm sure the ego has some very useful survival reasons. Like from an evolutionary standpoint, like we have to put a lot of importance on our own well-being and success. And so when we play pool, we tend to identify our lives with that pool game and we, care a lot about the outcomes. Fair enough. But the problem is that that ego has a lot of excuses to involve itself. Like, why you need me. The ego's like, no, you need me. People that don't, if you don't try to control it, it just won't work. And if you don't have me telling you what to do, then you'll never do it. And if I don't whip you when you make mistakes, then you won't be motivated to improve. And like the ego's really good at arguing why you need to serve it. And I'm better at arguing why you don't. So I could win that argument because I've had that with myself for years. And I understand how those pieces move on the chessboard. But the funny part is, it's just, there's a couple things. The first part is like, as a coach coaching a little league player, think about how I've said this before, think about how you treat an 8-year-old when you're teaching them to play a sport. Do you yell at him and beat him up and criticize him? And anytime he does anything right, that's what you expect. And anytime he does anything imperfect, you beat him up and you just zoom in on the difference between him and perfection. That's all you focus on is what he's not doing right. Because by setting impossibly high expectations, you're going to motivate him to get better than ever. It's like, that doesn't really work. So, but we coach ourselves that way. And one thing that I said, by the way, I got a message from my last student. I shared this story with my last student. I thought it was pretty cool. So shout out to Iker. But I mentioned something about meditation, which is if you're meditating and you're trying to keep focused on your breathing, and then your mind wanders and you find yourself thinking about what you're going to have for lunch. So now you catch your mind wandering. There's a path, there's a fork. You can either go back to lunch, or I'm sorry, go back to your breathing and just say, oh, okay, back to breathing. Or you can go on a rant and be like, you are supposed to be a good meditator and you are thinking about lunch. And that's not okay because you want to be better at meditating, right? That's what we're doing here is trying to meditate and you're not doing a very good job if you're thinking about lunch. Well, guess what? That whole stream and rant is 10 times further from your breathing than just thinking about lunch. So that's the ego's trying to, it's like, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Okay.
No, I absolutely love it. So between Hector and I think it was Joseph Smith, and I saw a comment from Joseph Smith. I think it was basically, your description was basically it because he says he was up 4-2, but then lost 4-7. So he lost 5 in a row. After that. So if it was the competitive cycle, the mind cycle or whatever, that he must have fell through either on a certain shot, through the match or whatever, it all made sense.
Yeah.
So
once again, I'm going to plug my mental game coaching. It's a lot of fun, guys. So it's 3 sessions in a group of 3 where you'd bring 5, 3, 4, 5 scenarios of things that you struggle with, bring them. And then I'll tell you, I'll kind of show you like a general approach I use to manage myself and my emotions and my thinking. And then how specifically I would troubleshoot when those things, basically it's 2 parts. 1, preventative. You build a way of thinking that minimizes the amount of negative emotion and pressure you create for yourself. And then 2, you learn when that's in a match, that's always at times going to go sideways. And then you learn how to recognize and troubleshoot when it does. That's kind of my approach. And then I tailor it to what the issues are so that we can work on that together. So,
okay, so we have more questions,
cool.
but I want to at least incorporate other topics that we were going to talk about, and then we'll go back to those questions. So on top of me playing in a slump, that's what basically generated this entire discussion to begin with. I want to add on top of, if I'm coming out of a slump, it kind of tailors into anybody's pool journey to where. One question I had is, when does luck become skill? And then what do you think would be good, tangible, I think would be the right way of saying it, tangible ways of knowing that you're actually improving, which I would say, making that hero shot is not a tangible way of improving, because even that tangible or that hero shot might be perceived as luck. And then going on to the next topic that I was talking about as well is, when does that luck shot become a skill shot?
Interesting. So you'd ask me about, how do you know if you're improving in general, like day after day, month after month? How do you know if you're getting better? What do you think? I mean,
well, so in the beginning, I can look back at my pool journey and come up with tangible ways of actually figuring it out. Whereas now, as I'm more mature, and then of course I don't have the time to practice like I did when I was younger and coming up, because when I was younger, learning how to play the game, especially once I fell in love with the game and really wanted to start learning it, all the players in my pool hall, I basically built this hit list. And it was like, this person's at the bottom. I start building this hierarchy.
Climbing up the ladder, yep.
A hierarchy tier list, right? To where it's like, if I can repeatedly beat this person, now I want to move on to the next person, and then the next person, and the next person, to the point to where, like, not so much to where I can see myself to the top, because to me, that's too high of an expectation. What I would like is, now that I've got this hierarchy, reasonably for me, I want to get to the middle. If I get to the middle, I don't have to get to the top. I might still try to strive to get to the top, but I don't have to get to the top. That's my reasonable thinking, where I think someone that's really in the competitive time, I got to be number 1. I don't have to be number 1. That's why I'm not striving to be a professional. I just want to be a good competitive player. That's where I label myself. So back then, that's what it was. So where, like, I'm sitting there trying to figure out, can I beat my bottom tier list guy? or gal, whatever person. And in the beginning, I can't. But then we're talking like, these are imaginary numbers that I'm making up, but it proves my scenario. Playing races to 9, I'm losing 9-1, 9-2, 9-3, whatever. Months go by, all of a sudden it's 9-5, 9-6. It's like I'm not getting smashed anymore. And then all of a sudden it switches to where now I win 9-8, 9-7, 9-6. And then all of a sudden it just keeps switching in that direction to where now I'm winning 9-3, 9-4. And when that happens to me, that's when I feel like, okay, I feel like I now have the upper edge on this player. Doesn't always mean I'm going to win, but when I look at that track history of look how badly they used to beat me years ago, and then now now I don't struggle as much. So now I move on to the next guy, and guess what? I go through that same exact cycle to where now I'm on to the next guy, and it's the same thing. So now I would think, does that translate to today? Well, I think in the short run, I could say yes, but in the long run, I can also say no, but I have to have a reality check of going, I don't practice as often as I used to. I don't compete as often as I used to. So when I go to these tournaments, I do kind of have this attitude, like when I go to the Texas Open, I have a couple of goals in mind. And if I can accomplish one of those goals, I'm happy. Don't go 2 and out. That's always the first goal. For a double elimination tournament, do not go 2 and out. At least try to get to 3 rounds. Since the Texas Open is a 2-day tournament, next goal, try to make it to day 2, because you don't even know if you're in the money if you're in day 2 or not. If I can accomplish that goal, try to get in the money. Where I could be at the bottom of the barrel of making the money. And if I get to that goal, then it's like, hell, we might as well go ahead and try to win at that point. And I think I translate that to basically everything in league, in tournament, just in general. It's like, where I create these reasonable, what I believe to be reasonable goals that I can make. And if I can hit one of them, I'm as good as I could go. But then one topic that I talked about before, or that I asked about before, so this is a third topic. We got 3 topics we're talking about all at once. Is, can a pool player or just a person in general hit a peak? So, not a plateau, a peak. Because a plateau, you would tend to try to break through it. But to the point to where if it's gonna get any better, there has to be like this great sacrifice in order to make it better. You've reached your limit.
Yeah.
And that's how I would say. So like right now, I went from running 79 balls almost 10 months ago to where 9 months after hitting 79, I hit 86. Is that an improvement? I could say yes, but then right after that 86 is a bunch of 10s and 12s. And
by the way, a lot of times if you go back to that competitor cycle, a lot of your best performances, and I want everyone to go back and listen to that again, a lot of your best performances are going to follow your worst bottoms, because it's when you hit that surrender spot that you play your best. And then at the same time, a lot of your slumps come after your best performances, because you have it, and now you're like, ha, now I'm an 86 ball runner. Now let's go for 100. I should be able to do that every time. Why isn't that working? It's like,
exactly.
Trust me, guys, this is a real thing.
Exactly.
So here's something that I think is really important to learn about the learning curve, right? When you start playing pool, you get better quickly. And then as you get better and better and better, that learning curve tapers and goes slower and slower and slower. So you've got 2 lines you got to keep your eye on. So the first thing is that learning curve. But then the second thing is the performance range of how we have good days and bad days. And some days you shoot the lights out, and some days you shoot like the lights are out. And so you have good days and bad days, and good days and bad days. And so there's variance. So here's how that creates it creates some faulty conclusions. When you're at the beginning of that learning cycle, I actually had a student email me about 3 months ago, and I told him I'd podcast about it. It's been a while. He said something about how he's not playing full time. He's not going to like make a run at being pro, but he's played a couple of years and he's gotten better very quickly. And in his mind, he's like, I kind of quietly believe that if I made a run at this, like in 3-4 years, I'd be playing phenomenal pool. And am I crazy for thinking this? And it's like, well, that's a reasonable extrapolation based on that beginning of that learning curve. What he doesn't realize is how much tougher, how much quicker that gets. So one of the illusions that we get is that we're on this quick path to the top. The other, because of the early rise. But the other thing, and Chris, this is the part I really want you to hear. the learning curve in the beginning, the growth is so quick that it outruns the variance of our own game. So in other words, if you're a beginner and you can only run 1 to 3 balls, and then a month later you can run, 5 to 10 balls, well, you're so much better that even on your bad days now, you're outperforming where you were a month ago because you've gotten so much better so quickly. And that can give you the illusion that progress is linear. Similarly, if you're playing weak enough players, the bottom of your range can actually get better than the top of their range, to where there are probably players that I could play if I played races to 11 big table 9 ball, to where no matter how bad I play and no matter how good they play, I'm going to win every set. So if I play them, the outcome is not in doubt. I will win that set. It's just mathematically as close to certainty as you can get. And when you are in the beginning of the learning curve, the guys that you're gunning for are weak, and you can actually develop your skills to where you almost always beat them. So we start making conclusions about what improvement looks like. And that improvement looks like is I will be able to see consistently higher performances than I had a month ago or a year ago. And I will be able to consistently beat people that used to consistently beat me. Those are some things that, and in the beginning, that can work. But the problem is, as you start plateauing out on that learning curve, or it starts flattening out, and as you start playing against guys, the guys you were gunning for in the beginning, they were like, recreational players, or they were casual players. They weren't as serious. Now you're playing against guys that are trying to do the same thing to you. And you're playing against guys that are 650, like, hey, shout out to Jesse Martin. You're playing against guys like that who's working hard to try to do the same thing. So all of a sudden, if you went from being a 79 ball high run to an 86 ball high run, is that growth? It's who knows, but the point is, your fluctuation in your game is such that your best days a year ago are going to be way better than your worst days now. And your best days a year ago are going to be way better than your worst days a year ago. So it's like, the point is that range is so wide. So it's like in the beginning, here's the curve, and that range is going up and down and up and down and up and down. And in the beginning, it's going up fast enough that even your downs are looking better. But as you get better and it plateaus out, it just looks turbulent, and it's hard to know if I'm getting better or not. And so it becomes more confusing. So the trick is you have to understand that the ways that you measured improvement in the beginning half of your learning curve just don't scale to the back half of your learning curve, because it's not as linear as you think it is. That's all. In the beginning, it seems it's the illusion of linear, and then it goes haywire. So of course, in general, we can look at Fargo rate, who you can beat, what's your high run, what are your best finishes in some tournaments. Those are all some things you can kind of look at to get estimates of how you're performing. But then somebody else mentioned something about how it just also takes a little trust. I think Nate mentioned that short-term tournament results aren't necessarily a good way to measure. And so I agree. And so it's this trick where, I don't think success is a measure of improvement. And even the things you were talking about the goals you have for tournaments, not going 2-0, getting in the money, whatever. I don't use any of those goals because those are all result goals, and I don't really know what's going to happen when I go play a tournament. So my goals I do it this way: short-term, long-term. Long-term goals have to be result goals because we have to have something we're aiming at. Running 100 balls is a great goal in a long-term goal. Getting to the point where you get the highest rating in your league or something. Whatever. Those are reasonable goals. Hitting 650 Fargo is a reasonable goal. In the short term, when I go to a tournament or play a set, flip a coin, those are all result goals are no good. I need process goals. So my goals are maybe to make good decisions. I want to be able to look myself in the mirror tonight and know that I made good decisions, gave it my best effort, and had a smile on my face and enjoyed the adversity I was facing. Those are my goals when I play a tournament. Results will come when they come. And I compare this as an analogy. If you're driving somewhere, you have your map, and then you have the windshield and your road in front of you. And before you drive somewhere, you need to have a destination, and you need to plot out what roads you're going to take to get there. You have to. If you just drive around randomly, of course, it doesn't work. But then once you know, okay, I'm going to be on this highway for 35 miles, great. Now you spend 99% of your time with your eyes on that road. And then maybe in 20 minutes, you glance down to figure out when your next turn is, and then you go back to the road. Well, the road is your process. and the map and your long-term destination is your long-term result goal. So to me, if you're driving with your eyes on your map, bad things are going to happen. So what you do is, of course, you have to have a result goal. Otherwise, what are your processes aiming to do? What are you trying to accomplish with them? But what's the point? You have to have a destination you're targeting and a plan of where you're going to go to steer that direction. But then as you're playing day by day, I'm focused on what's in front of me. So for me, I just wanted to mention that process goals while I compete, result goals as I plan my career, where I need to go and how many hours I need to put in and which tournaments I need to play. So result goals are for my career management. Process goals are for my competition.
And you remember I had a question about the process oriented thinking, which was something that I've had a recent hard time struggling with, where at one point in time I was always focused on the process. And my question is, do you know of a way to balance this process oriented mind when no results are coming? So for example, I can look at my process of going from, I started off somewhere in the 30s and 40s was my personal best. I eventually broke 50. And now I'm sitting here in the high 80s. I'm one rack short of scoring 100, and it's taking me 2 years to get this long. And if ego is doing this to me, okay, fine, I can certainly surrender that. But then, am I wrong to say to myself, should it have taken, the magic word should it have taken 2 years, or should it have taken 3 years or 4 years?
This is a great question. So here's an analogy. Suppose I was to go on a diet, because on camera I can see I could use a diet. So, thanks for this. I
don't think so.
This is why I usually do audio only. Yeah. No, but there's a question, like, how often should you get on a scale? And it's like, well, clearly you need to know where you're at and what your target weight is. And then there has to be some type of check-in to where you figure out, is what I'm doing getting me on a trajectory that's working? So maybe that check-in could be, every couple weeks, or, once a week to once a month. But if you're like weighing yourself after every meal and every morning and 5 times a day, it's like, wait a second. This is not only not effective because there's body weight fluctuations and times a day and humidity and water and all this stuff, but not only is this not useful because there's variance, but it's like neurotic. And like, this is like, you're going to get like some kind of eating disorder, and you drive yourself into a mental hospital and like start cutting yourself. Like, this is going down a wrong road here. Like, that's just weird. That's weird. So it's the same thing with pool. It's like, we have to open our eyes and ask ourselves, how are we progressing? How are we doing? And we have to have some periodic check-ins where we ask ourselves, are we going towards our destination? Are the things like I said, are the game management, how much I'm practicing, what I'm practicing, how I'm, how I play, the tournaments I'm playing, who I'm competing with. Yeah, sorry, Craig. I got dark fast, he said. Yeah. Anyway, but like, you have to have those check-ins. But you also can't check them too often, and you can't hold them too tightly. And what I've experienced is there are, of course, I run in a world of serious pool players. So maybe among recreational players, it's different. Maybe among recreational players, they're not very effective at setting goals and holding themselves to progress and being accountable. But for the people that I work with and the people that I compete with and the people in my circle, I'm in a kind of a serious, obsessive pool circle. It tends to be the opposite end of the spectrum, where people are measuring themselves. They're getting every shot. Every time they miss a shot, they're getting on that scale. And every time they win a match or lose a match, or every time they have a high run, or every time they miss a ball, or basically after every session, and sometimes after every game and after every ball, they're like, am I on the right track? Am I on the right track? Is this working? Do I need to make changes? Am I on the right road? Am I on the right road? And I'm like, man, that's a little obsessive, and that's not very fun, and it's not very effective. So yeah.
All right, cool. Let's see. Let's go ahead and look at a couple more questions. See, the next one here. Well, this comes from Renee. So when you're in a slump, do you think it's better to continue competing or take some time off and do some solo practice until you get out of it? I like the answer you gave me. You gave me last night about when you're at your, or we talked about when you're at your worst, or like this is a one-off and you write it off, and like that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking for myself, like, from a financial standpoint, if I have to think about spending a couple $1,000 to go compete in a tournament, I've got to figure out which tournament I'm going to sign up for. If I'm at my absolute worst, like from a financial standpoint, maybe the timing isn't optimal. But honestly, like I just keep going. Like I don't really change anything. Like it's going to do what it's going to do. It works itself out. I think, I thought about this with relationships too, where I think a lot of times when people are trying to, get into a relationship, like a marriage or a long-term relationship, they're worried about some very superficial things about how you click. And sure, we like the same TV shows. And it's like, this is a long voyage, man. And the weather's going to get stormy. So I think about like, if you're Christopher Columbus and you're going to set sail and cross the ocean, do you wait for a really sunny day or make sure that there's no clouds in the sky? Because now, I think it's looking like a good time for this voyage. It's like, look, man, you're going to be on this voyage for months. And along the way, your ship is going to get storm tossed and you're going to run out of fresh fruit and you'll probably lose 20% of the people to scurvy. I'm trying to get dark for Craig. Okay. The point is, it would be absurd to worry too much about what the weather's like right now, because it's going to get worse and better and worse and better and whatever. It's irrelevant. What matters is that you have a good map, you know how to navigate, you've got good timekeeping and good, logs and charts, and that you have a sturdy ship and good supplies. That's what matters. It doesn't matter what the weather's like right now. So to me, whether I'm in a slump or not is like whether the sun is shining or behind the clouds at this hour. That could change in an hour. And one thing that to talk about what you mentioned, I had a student that came out and worked with me, and I think he's mad at me. Once in a while I get a little high intensity, and sometimes I think I get a little bit too high intensity, and I was, because on our last day after the boot camp, we were playing a little bit, playing some Scotch doubles, and he was really struggling, like bottom of his range, completely struggling. And this makes sense for a couple reasons. One reason is he's tired. We just did 3 days of training, and he's got a bunch of new stuff in his mind. And then on top of that, there might be some pressure he's putting on himself about how he's playing with me and he doesn't want to let me down, or how he's got some story he's telling himself about how I'm going to learn all these skills and I'm going to be playing really good, and all these expectations. Even if he doesn't know it, you might have some quiet expectations about how you're going to be playing right at the end of this boot camp and how you're going to show the new level of play. So because of fatigue and expectation and all this pressure, all of a sudden, anyway, he was playing really bad. And he was playing like, everybody knows what I'm talking about. When you're playing worse than you thought you were capable of playing. Like, I thought that a player that got to my level would play bad, but I never thought that I could ever regress to this level to where I don't even know if I could pick up a ball and drop it in a pocket. And I don't even know why I call myself a pool player. I ever thought I could play this game. And by the way, whatever my Fargo is, 720 something, like, I get that way. And so, but what happened was, I got the sense from him that he just wanted to, like, you know what? I'm not myself right now. I don't know what's bothering me. I don't know what it is, but maybe I'm just too tired, or maybe I'm just too overwhelmed. I got too much on my mind. I need to put my cue down, get on the plane, go home, get a good night's sleep, hit some balls, work some of this into my game, and then I'm sure I'll feel better and that won't happen anymore. And I got kind of upset by that, because I'm like, no. This is pool. That happens. And to look at that as like, I'm not myself right now, that this doesn't reflect me, and I'm sure I won't do this again. It's like, no, you will. That'll come up again and again and again. And a lot of times, when you're playing in a tournament, if you're playing a money match, and you could decide not to call a guy today if you're not feeling up to it, or you could call the guy and match up with him when you're feeling your best. You get to pick. But in a tournament, man, that's Tuesday. You're going to feel like that all the time, where you're just like really not feeling like, you feel like, I just want to go home and never, write this day off. But you're still competing. And so you got to keep going. And that 9 ball's a momentum game. And the one thing I've learned is how quick that competitor cycle can strike. And so I actually made a note for this podcast, and it says, you're one shot away from heaven and you're one shot away from hell. And that when you feel like you're at your absolute worst, sometimes one shot can turn it around. And on the other hand, when things are going smooth and you're up 4-2 in that race to 7 and everything's going well, you could get a little lackadaisical, get ahead of yourself, leave the moment, and one shot and everything can go sideways and you can't get that momentum back. And so when you're at your worst, you do want to keep playing because that's the par for the course. It's part of the course, and that it can turn around. So just keep going.
And I want to add to that because I've had conversations with like some of my APA teammates and stuff, and I talked about before, like when I'm off camera and I was in my slump and I was a lot more colorful off camera. But you get that notion of like, well, if you're just that freaking frustrated, why don't you just take a break, calm down, and then come back and try again. And I get that response, but like Demetrius is talking about, I can't do that. Or I choose not to do that because I feel like that is the opportune moment for me to try to solve whatever is wrong because I'm in the comfort of my own home. No one's watching me. And it's like, because I can't imagine if something similar to that happens in a gambling match, in a tournament. What am I going to do? Walk away and calm down? And like, you can't do that in the minute. Like, you have to be able to hopefully try to figure it out right then and there. And after our talk that we had last night, and even what we're doing right now, I'm hoping now that when, not a matter of if, but when that slump happens again, what you called it getting back to the beginner mind cycle. That's kind of what I would hope that I can achieve with more peace and less frustration.
So, what came to my mind? What came to my mind is instead of trying to get out of a slump, enjoy your slumps. How about that? How about if I simplify it all to just, hey guys, enjoy your slumps.
Yeah.
And when you're in a slump, instead of trying to change it, just be like, hey, it's absurdly comical how tough this game is and how sideways it is and how cartoonishly like everything seems so weird. My stroke is goofy and the tables look weird. And it's just enjoy that. Enjoy that sensation of how tough the game is, and then have fun battling and have fun trying to pursue anyway. Have fun to say everything's cartoonishly tough right now. This is just a different, it's like, look at it this way, guys. If you went and played on a 6x12 snooker table and you struggled to pocket balls, you wouldn't be surprised. You'd be like, well, this is a really, really, really tough table, and I understand it's going to be hard, so it'll be fun to test how hard it is on a 6x12. Well, when you're slumping, just look like, okay, well, now it's the part where I'm slumping, and everything is about as hard as it would normally be on a 6x12 snooker table, so let's just have fun trying my hand against what seems like an impossible game, and enjoy how tough it is. And then when it feels easy, enjoy, see what you can do when it feels easy. And when it's impossible, see what you can do when it feels impossible. And just enjoy it. Okay.
Nope. And that's what I'm clearly going to be start working on from here on out. All right. I think the next question is more of a let's have fun question.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's not. So it's going to be the next one after this. Okay. So this is from Doug Cora. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Let's say some mechanical problems has slowly, insidiously crept into your game. Let's say you started aligning with your stance more close or more open than normal. If you don't go through a checklist of possible root causes, how do you correct it? Just play through it and let your subconscious correct it? Or is it okay to try to identify the root cause, I think is what you meant to say, and fix it?
Yeah, this is such a good question. And it mirrors the process and result thing. I think that if somebody never pays any attention to what they're doing physically, and they have recurring problems that last for months and months and months, then to not give that to not listen to what the universe is trying to tell you would be kind of obtuse, or am I being obtuse? I love that. Anyway. But on the other hand, if we check that map too often, and every time we miss a ball, we're like, oh, am I doing that thing with my foot? And every time we have a bad session, we're like, I wonder what part of my fundamental. So there's two things. One is there's a diminishing level of return on work on your fundamentals. So almost every beginning league player and every recreational player could definitely benefit from an instruction on fundamentals. And most players I coach, even though I'm not a fundamental guy, like when I got that question about draw and dropping the tip and dropping the shoulder, like, yes, I know I can talk to this. But as we get better and better, there's less and less return on fundamentals. And secondly, we don't want to go down the road where we start troubleshooting our fundamentals shot by shot, rack by rack, session by session. So if you're like, every time you miss a shot or every time you start struggling with something, you're like trying to figure it out and fix it, like that's way too much analytical control over really complex, delicate, subconscious parts of your game. But if things are going on for months and months and months and you're not thinking about or paying attention to it, then that's a problem too. So again, it's like getting on the scale. How often do you get on the scale? And I think what I've seen is most players are way too analytical and way too controlling about their fundamentals. And so I think people overdo that stuff a lot. And I give a lot of warnings about that. But that being said, yes, if you've identified the two questions, here's a situation shooting off the rail that comes up a lot, and there is a gap between me and my peers, and this has been an ongoing thing where for some reason, I just don't have the accuracy and success off the rail that I see my peers have, and it's been happening, it's been months or years, then yes, I think it behooves you to, but here's what I'd say. There's two ways you can do it. You can do it, very controlling, I am going to figure out what they are doing different. And then I'm going to make myself do that. I am going to get these results. And the way it's going to work is I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to implement it, and I'm going to practice it until I don't do it wrong again. And then I'm going to get the results I want. And it's like, whoa. Too much emotion, too much control. So what I would say instead is to be curious, not furious, to be like, this isn't working right. And let's tinker with this, and let's see, and let's just kind of lead my brain down this path and watch some other players play off the rail, and then watch a video of myself off the rail, or see what's going on and tinker. Like last night, I can make short jumps, but when I'm making full court jumps, I'm consistently overcutting the ball. And I was like, you could tell my tone was like this. It was tinkering. It was like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder why that's happening. That's curious. True. Let's hit some balls. Let's see how it goes. Let's try some different things. At no point was it like, I am going to fix this, and here's, so in short, not obsessively, not every rack and every shot, but over time, if there's a skill gap between you and someone else in a certain area, and it persists over time, and it may be fundamentally caused, then carefully detached, lead your brain, kind of, fiddle around in that area. So I would say it's closer to letting yourself figure it out subconsciously, but with just a little guidance to steer through the right waters where your brain can figure it out.
Doug, I hope that helps you out. And for a little context of what Demetrius was talking about with the jump shots that we were doing during our set, is because when our set was over, Demetrius basically asked me about my jumps, because I had a lot of jumps during that set that we played. Some of them, I nailed them, like, hard of the pocket, got position on the ball. And then other ones, like, I made good contact and I barely missed the pocket. Whereas what Demetrius talked about on certain jump shots is if it was a long jump and it was a cut shot, he would end up overcutting the shot. And that basically spawned the conversation of, is there something I could tell him that how I do a jump that is allowing me to be more accurate than what he was currently doing during the set? So of course we did the tinkering. I said, well, this is what I do. And he already acknowledges what I do, because he watched me go through my series of my pre-shot routine of how I tried to execute the jump shot. And we even tried tinkering of doing that, which is lining up the shot as if you're not going to jump and then try to elevate. And I acknowledge that if I do that, there's a possibility that as I'm elevating, my body might twist and turn and, but all I can do is trust the process that I'm going to raise perfectly straight up now that I know that I'm lined up, and then hit. And through the hours of practice that I've done jump shots with, that's how I've been able to be as accurate as I can be sometimes, because there's still a lot of times where I'm going to overcut the shot, or I just might miss the ball altogether. Like it still ends up happening. But that's the context of the tinkering around with the jump shots, because just as much as Demetrius is my coach, he has acknowledged that there are some things where I do slightly better than him, and he picks my brain about it.
And even if you don't do something better than me, it doesn't mean that you don't have two eyes and a brain. I mean, of course.
Correct.
And what I think I figured out after last night was, for me, is you saw I made a bunch of really good elevated shots.
Yes.
Without the jump. Like if I was just jacked up off the rail, I practiced that obsessively. Like for years, guys, obsessively elevated shots were my nemesis. And I'm not saying I'm the best at them, but like I watch guys like Oscar Dominguez and Billy Thorpe hit elevated shots. I'm like, man, talk about like me, the guys I'm looking at, not to say that I'm gunning for them, but those are the guys I'm kind of following. And there's a lot of things I do as well as them, but man, they elevate so strong. And I'm like, I just didn't. So I've worked on it for years. And what I've learned about my game from last night was, I think that my accuracy with jumping is high as long as I'm able to use a standard elevated stroke.
Sure.
And once I get to where I have to side arm, that I think that I've had success before. But what doesn't work is when I try to use a normal stroke, there's only, like, you can only use that normal elevated stroke. You can only use the cue in the normal position for so long. You reach a certain elevation where you have to use a sidearm.
Yep.
And so what I think happens, Chris, is maybe I try to keep using this as much. I like that as much as I can, but when I get to a certain elevation, it breaks down and gets offline. And so I think that if I know I'm going to be elevated past whatever the angle of where I can use a normal stroke is, I have to start sidearm and come up this way.
Yep.
And I think because I've had success before, and I think that's what I want to tinker with. So next time I tinker, I'm going to be tinkering with that, but we'll see how it goes.
Yep. Now I know for certain this next question is let's have fun question.
All right.
Because the practice room wants to know my beard. What do you think? Should I shave it or should I keep it?
Boy, I mean, I think, okay, so I put whatever you want to do, Chris. Now, personally, I think it's a good, I like it. I think it's good, but in the end, guys, it's like, what color shirt do you want to wear tomorrow? I don't know.
So I've embraced the beard game. I just don't know how long I'm gonna let it grow out.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've now, as far as I know, have cleared the queue of questions. If we've missed your question and you would still want to hopefully have it answered, clearly type it back in and we can try to go on. But what I can say is we've currently been going on for 2 hours.
Yeah.
I feel like there was still another topic or two that we wanted to cover tonight, but I just don't seem to know what it is. I've been enjoying ourselves so much.
Yeah. There was something when it comes to your growth and your 100,000 subscribers.
Oh, okay.
So one of the things, and I was kind of planning on doing this in the beginning, but some people that haven't seen Little Chris's videos, how long have you been YouTubing, Chris? When did you get into it?
My first official post was about 4 years ago.
Okay. So, and I know we've talked a little bit about it. So when you got into this, what I like, and you were talking about podcasting for amateurs, because there's a lot of stuff out there focusing on news and events of the top pros. So one thing that I think when I think about your growth, and I don't know why I never thought of this before. So maybe you have years ago and this is obvious, but there's a metric that I was thinking about measuring. And I think, we've seen a lot of growth in pool. We've seen growth with, Matchroom and a lot of top pros, and there's been an influx of pool. And I've seen it with your YouTube growth. I've seen it in tournaments are filling up very fast now. I mean, the number of people, Derby, for the first time, Derby City sold out. Like you couldn't get in at the door for the first time in 25 years. Turning Stone, I'm on a waiting list. I'm not even sure if I can play. It's filling up so fast. So tournaments are filling. Texas Open sold out 3 months in advance. Like everything's like, where is all this coming from? What I thought about was this, and this, again, is your home, so you know all about it. But if we were to ask, what percentage of recreational APA players know who Efren Reyes is or know who Shane is? If we went back to like 1998 or 2002 or 2000, say 2000, we walked into some pool league and we asked a bunch of APA players if they knew who the best player in the world is. What percentage could have answered? 5%? Okay. Because that was before YouTube and internet. I mean, effectively, small numbers of people that we're really using. And I forget about this because now it's such a part of our life that we forget how new it is. But really, only in the last 10, 15 years, in 2000, if somebody, or even 2005, if somebody was like playing a pool league, they might just play pool. And they might never have looked up an instructional video and if they did, there wasn't really much out there. But now in 2020 or 2019, when you got started, anybody that's playing a league, even if they're recreational, they're not a serious player. They're not really trying to get better. They're just kind of having fun with their buddies. But all it takes is just one thought of, I wonder, I'm playing this game. I wonder, how do you get good at pool? All they have to do is type that into a search bar one time. And all of a sudden, there's all this content. And they can be like, oh, look at this. Here's a video. I never thought of that. Oh, that's interesting. I never thought of that. And oh, here's a match between some players. Oh, look what's possible. That's pretty cool. And I could learn how to do that. I want to try that. And all of a sudden, this recreational player kind of turns into somebody that's like, maybe I want to learn this game a little bit. And all of a sudden, they start getting exposed to like the top players, and that's how it should look, and that's how it can look. And I bet that if we measured the number of APA players, and I'm curious, you're going to have a much better pulse on this than I am.
Okay.
But my guess would be if you had to measure what the percentage of APA players today that could name a top pro, my guess is that if I had to guess, I would have said in 2000, it might have been 5%. And today, I would guess 30 to 50%.
I probably would guess higher.
Higher than that?
Higher than that.
So this, to me, is the big growth spurt in pool, is that we've got, if you've got 100,000 subscribers, there's hundreds of thousands of recreational pool players. And for many years, we were always like, how can we use that huge recreational pool base and get them more serious about pool? And all the best efforts and strategies kind of failed. But YouTube has succeeded, and social media has brought these players into their phone and living room. And so all of a sudden, going to Derby is not just this, I hear that they have for these pro tournaments. It's like, no, I see them and I know people that are going to them and I see the people and what they're doing. And all of a sudden, it's right there. And so the number, like I've been very, fortunate to have a lot of people come out and train. And I think like, what is, why am I successful? And it's like, well, because the number of people that are going from recreational to serious, it's really changed quickly. And I think that YouTube and internet has been a big part of that. And I think that like your growth in part has been because of that. And that growth has been in part because of you. So it's like this cycle. So what are your thoughts on that? Does that make sense?
So I didn't necessarily hear a question in that, but I'm gonna answer based on what I think you're trying to say. And that is, so for someone like myself, when I first started to get into this and I knew I wanted to start making YouTube content, it wasn't strictly to be about pool though. It was supposed to be about me as a fitness person, because when I started 4 years ago, I was more into fitness than I am now that I'm in my 40s. But I'm also a software developer. That's what I do professionally as my trade. And then, of course, I've been playing pool for 20 some odd years when I had started. So those were the three things that I wanted my YouTube channel to be about. But when I did fitness stuff, didn't really, catch a lot of eyes and catch a lot of views. And then when I did some programming stuff, it kind of didn't do the same thing. But when I started doing pool, that's when everything started to come together. And I'm getting hundreds and thousands of views and followers, galore the moment I started posting pool videos. And then, so for myself, I started noticing a couple of things. One, because before I started doing pool, I had to study, because as an intellect, I'm like, okay, wait a minute. There's already Dr. Dave. There's already Chervary. Yeah. There's already these content creators that have already covered what I want to cover. So it's like I'm rehashing everything. So considering that if I type in how to use Ghost Ball, I'm going to see probably hundreds of different videos. How in the world am I going to do a Ghost Ball video that separates from all of those videos? That's what I had to struggle with. And eventually I come up with something and I put it out there and just see how it works. And you've seen it in some of the chat messages, to where people seem to, what's the word I'm looking for? They're able to register, they're able to pick up my presentation versus somebody else's presentation. And that, I'm not trying to say that certainly means that I'm better than them, because as an educator, I used to be a college faculty member. People learn differently. And that's why when I was starting, I was studying Dr. Dave's video, watching how he presents. I was studying Chervary, watching how and all these other content creators, I was watching how they present. And I would look through their comment sections of whatever their videos are and see questions. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, is the question being asked because the presenter didn't present well enough? Or is it because the questioner, or is it because the questioner couldn't understand what was being presented? Those would be the two possibilities. And regardless of what the answer was, my goal was to try to figure out a way to present to where I get as minimal amount of questions as possible, to know that I've covered as much detail as I possibly could. And a lot of people tell me I succeed at doing that. There's still occasions to where like I might talk about something and I can see you forgot about this, you forgot. It's like, okay, cool. Well, then I have to spend another 6 or 7 hours trying to stick that little tidbit, into the video, and that ends up happening. So all I know is this. when I started 4 years ago, I was at whatever level I was at. And since 4 years ago, and then of course training with you, when I make a YouTube video, this is what I always love to talk about. I'm also practicing because now I'm about to break down a skill so hard that hopefully any amateur can pick it up. And in doing so, I end up finding something in that a skill that I thought I had good and down. Like, wow, I never even noticed that that needed to be there. And I can teach about it. And you know, when I go to APA Nationals in Vegas, and a lot of people are just like, I've learned this from you. I've learned this from you. And they're like, you know, that it just means the world to me, to where not only have I progressed from making YouTube videos, from practicing and competing, coaching and everything else, and the amount of people that I've also affected in helping their pool game improve, to where I can claim that, you know, one side goal that I obviously have is to bring up the popularity, bring pool more into the world. And clearly I must be succeeding at that if I have at least 100,000 subscribers, and I'm hearing all these stories about how this person has gone from this skill level to this skill level, or this person's now competing intermediately and going to big tournaments and stuff. And it's all, you know, in part of what I've done, what Dr. Dave's done, what Chervary's done. We've all done our little parts here, to where if we didn't do what we did, like you said, in the early 90s or the late 80s, when none of this technology really existed, the hours and hours of torture a person has to put themselves through to try to go from a 2-ball runner to a 3-ball runner, you know, or whatever. And now here's a little video to where if it's explained well enough and you follow the steps well enough, you can just jump leaps and bounds within your skill level. But then for someone like myself, I'm learning there's a point to where, whoa, I've hit that plateau. I've got to that plateau pretty quickly, like you said, because the beginning progress is rather quick. And then you hit that plateau, and now you're looking for something that is so small that it might take a coach, or it takes another set of eyes to figure out that small little thing that is actually holding you back from, you know, reaching the next level or doing anything after that. So all I know is this: I'm at where I'm at. We can certainly, let's talk about this on paper. I'm at where I'm at, and on paper you're better than me. On paper, I'm better than a lot of players. So you said so yourself that even for you as an instructor, you can teach all the way back to the beginning. It's not your preference, but you can. And then you're more geared towards taking someone like me and pushing me to the next level. Well, for me, I'm that person that goes all the way back to the beginning, right, and tries to help pull them up to me. And then after I get them up to me, it's like, I've done what I've done. Like now we need someone like you to go a step further. And that's kind of where I've placed it all together. And that seems to be where my popularity seems to be. Yeah,
I always think about it like there's a pyramid where you've got 200,000 recreational players or whatever, and then you've got like, you know, 10,000 like serious amateurs, and you've got like a few hundred regional tournament players that go to travel around to national tournaments, and then you got a few pros. And it's like, if you're looking to help as many people as you can, and if you're hoping to get views or just have anybody pay attention, like targeting that 200,000 at the bottom of the pyramid is number one, you're going to get more out of it. But number two, you're going to be able to help more people, because that's really the volume of people. For me, you know, I'm not a YouTuber, I'm not an influencer. But I happen to be, when it comes to advanced pool, very few people know the game like I know the game, and very few people can explain the game like I can explain the game. And so if you put those two things together, it's just there's very few people that have the knowledge I have and can communicate it effectively and can help develop people the way I can. So for me, I focus on not the top of the pyramid, but I focus on that. I felt that there was a neglected. Oh, thank you very much, Texas. There was a neglected area, which is like the people that already have seen the videos and read the books and can run a few racks of 9-ball and just don't know where to go from there. What help is there for them? And I didn't see much. And so those are the people I worked with. Now, I had a 9-year-old daughter that started playing pool from scratch, that got to where she could run tables on a 9-foot diamond. So yeah, I can work with all levels, but I tend to work with people that are intermediate to advanced and can handle 3 days of training. Which tends to be intermediate to advanced. If you have questions on that, call me. But yeah, what you've done. So here's my question. there's so much information available that it can almost be overkill.
Sure.
So now the one way that people can find where to start is if they have a specific question, like, hey, I'm working on my draw. They could go to your channel or Little Chris Draw Shot, and I'm sure you'd have videos. But if they don't have a specific question and they're just like, where do I start? Like, what is there? Because one of the things that coaching does live is that you can give them custom information or steer them to the right information. If somebody, and I know you do video reviews for people too sometimes, where
I haven't done that in a long time, but I did. But
it was fun, yeah. But like, is there a way that somebody that's coming to your channel could figure out where they should start viewing chronologically, or in terms of like?
Okay, so to that, it's been a while since I've actually made a lesson type video. I've been more into streaming and making like YouTube shorts or something. But when I was doing all of my lesson videos, because that's what made me popular, I did attempt to start at the very basics of fundamentals and then progressively get harder with the topics. I mentioned about this before, to where in the beginning, I was able to put out a video basically once a week as I was covering the quote unquote simpler topics for me, but they might not be simpler topics for a beginner. But I was able to cut these videos out in a couple, 8 or so hours or whatever. But then once I started approaching the harder topics and life starts to get hectic, work starts to be more demanding of me, I can't make a video in a day.
Yeah, you told me it went from being a couple, 2, 3, 4 hours of editing to like 10, 15, 20 hours of editing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So, but the videos that I did make, to answer your question, they are organized in a playlist in chronological sequence, to where like, here's how you hold the cue. Here's how you should place your feet, or you should do this. And then after you master the fundamentals, here's a video on ghost ball. After you do ghost ball, here's how to break an 8-ball rack, or here's how to break a 9-ball rack. After you get that, here's how to maybe bank a ball in, or here's how to judge a carom. Here's how to,
so you've got it. So there's a playlist on your channel. So go to his channel, you can go to playlists, and there's kind of like from the beginning. And if you want to, if you're already an intermediate player, you can kind of go through them and say, I know I'm good there. I know I'm good there. I know I'm good there. But then you get to the first video is number 7 on his list, and you're like, I want to watch this one. Yeah, good.
Right.
I just wanted to kind of guide people on how they might get started on that. That's really cool. And also, you know what? Sensei Nate Tam, want to shout out to him, and he's got a cool YouTube channel as well. So if you haven't watched any of Nate Tam's videos, then check it out. Oh, and I got a question. What's the best time to go visit Demetrius?
Plug your bootcamp.
Yeah. Call me, email me, info@mnpoolbootcamp.com, or check out my website and send me an email. And I usually, these things usually get scheduled anywhere from 3 to 6 months out. And then sometimes, when I do something like this with Chris, I usually get a little busier. So the waiting list grows. And then at some point, if the waiting list grows too long, or if the scheduling gets too far out, I kind of hold off and put people on a wait list. So right now, I'm scheduling. There was 6 months where I was kind of putting people on a wait list, and now I've kind of caught up to where I'm looking to schedule for December, February, March. January is like a tournament month with Derby and stuff. So yeah, let's talk and we'll rock and roll.
Okay, cool. And then
you were talking about, there's something else you talked about with peaking. We never talked about peaking as your ability.
Yes,
we're kind of jumping around.
Yeah. As a pool player, I think it's fair to say, let's do weightlifting. Yeah. Everybody physically has a peak, and there's probably no way to break through that peak. Like, I might be able to, I don't know, I'm just going to make up some numbers. I might be able to bench press 180 pounds or 150 pounds, whatever. Right. And if I work hard enough, then, at one point in time when I was heavy into fitness, I maxed out at 225. I'd be surprised if I can even press 180 by now, but I did max out at 225. And I would say at my stature, unless I make this absolute sacrifice of going on this giant bulk and, doing whatever and just feeding and doing a bunch of heavy lifting or whatever, right? And then, I'll break through and do 240 or 250 or whatever. And so I'm thinking the same thing when you look at, an amateur pool player to the top professional pool player, because I can remember a time where everybody talked about Shane Van Boening. And everybody still talks about Shane Van Boening, so I'm certainly not discrediting it. But There was a point in time
I
where
mean, it's been like a week and a half since he's won a world championship. You know what I mean?
but that is exactly my point. Like Shane, there was a point in time where Shane Van Boening was on top of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, I mean, in my opinion, he still is. So Shane, if you happen to see this, I mean, love you, man, and love your game. But it doesn't change the fact that at some point in time, Joshua Filler took that spot. And I think it basically started happening during Mosconi time frame, when everything started happening. And then at one point in time, Joshua Filler fell off the market. And now everybody started talking about Francisco Sanchez Ruiz. And like, there's all these people that keep, and now Fedor Gorst is now in that topic. And you would think at some point in time, there's going to be some young gun that's going to be hungry, and they're going to reach that point. So when these things start to happen, does that necessarily mean that the people that we were once talking about, have they peaked? That's my question.
So, yeah. So this is really cool. And the first thing is, as Nate said something in this about how measuring your, somebody else just asked a question about the level of play and Fargo rate and wanting to see a graph about Fargo rate improving at the competition at amateur and pro level.
Yeah, I know the comment.
Throw that on the screen there.
Let's see if I can find it.
A little lower than that. It was right there.
Right here.
Yep. So I'd like to see the stats for the past decade on how much the level of competition has risen across all levels, amateur on pro, based on Fargo ratings. The tricky part is that if Fargo ratings measure performance against each other, I don't really know enough about Fargo rate to know if everyone got 50% better overnight, would the Fargo rates even change? Or would those Fargo rates just correspond to different skills? I don't even know. I don't want to get into that. That's math stuff. And that's for either Mike Page or Steve Ernst. But anyway, shout out to those. Steve, he came and trained with me, and he's the statistician behind Fargo. Pretty cool guy. But what I will say is that the level of competition has gotten much higher at the amateur level and at the pro level. A couple things I can tell you. So in terms of measuring results in tournaments, it's hard for me because my results in pro tournaments have gotten worse. But I looked at the 2005 US Open, which is the first one I played. And when you looked at the final 48, I finished 33rd through 48th. I cashed my first US Open. When I looked at the top 48 and you look at the countries, you see the sea of American flags with a few spatters like a Philippine flag and a Europe flag. Now you look at the top 48 and it's like, you need a microscope to find that red, white, and blue. You know what I mean? So the tournaments that I used to play in, the US Open, I cashed in 05, I played at 09, 10, 12. I cashed my first 4 US Opens and I had some good runs. One time I got to the final 16 undefeated and ended up in 17th place. And, I was tied for 17th through 24th or whatever. Like, that was my best finish. I'm like, oh, it was fun. But I haven't been able to duplicate that. It's like, have I gotten worse? Well, no. When I did that, it was just not. I mean, I remember by final 16 undefeated, I played Donnie Mills in the final 16. And then on the B side, I played Johnny Archer. And it's like, I'm not saying those guys would be good draws. Like, Donnie is a hell of a player. But like, now if you get to the final 16 of the US Open, trust me, like, it's just different. I remember Jason Klatt took third, from Canada. I mean, great performance, but like, Jason Klatt's not getting third in today's fields. I mean, the level of competition has gotten absurdly difficult. And the number of top players has gone from Shane was the reason he was so dominant was because he was like the only guy playing at that level, basically, in 2007 through 2014. And then all in 2007, he raised the bar. And then fast forward 10 years to 2017, and all the 8 and 10 and 12-year-olds that were watching Shane on YouTube in 2007 and say, that's what I need to do. 10 years later, they're all 18 and 20 and 22, and you got Albin Ocean and Clenty Kachi and Josh Filler and Fedor Gorst. All of a sudden, you got 30 other guys that play almost as good, and it's like this robot army of Shanes you got to beat now. And that's what happened. Well, and the same thing has happened at the amateur level. The number of people clicking on your YouTube video saying, I think I want to learn this game. I work with these guys. This gentleman, Iker, that came out last week, he's been playing seriously for 2 years. He plays well. I mean, it's a remarkable. Like, when I think about how long it took me to learn how to get to the level he's at, it took me 5 years to do a lot of play to get to where he got in 2 years. There was a young gentleman from he was 17 years old named Cal from the Kansas City area, came out and trained with me a few weeks ago. maybe a month ago or two. And 1 year, I'm like, he's not ready for a 3-day boot camp. He's only been playing for a year. He can't. He plays good. He's running 9-ball racks, and everybody looks like a Polish pro now. They all strike super clean, and their fundamentals are good, and they're all professional, and they have their own shots, and they're good pre-shot routines. And I'm like, man, in 1 year, this kid's playing like good pool. And it's like, what in the world is going on? So when people are trying to get better and measure their success against their peers, it's tough when your peers are also getting better very, very, very quickly. So for me to measure my results against tournament results, like my tournament performances have gotten worse compared to where they were 20 years ago. But am I playing worse, or is the competition just stellar, right? It went from national level to international level and really, really changed. And the same thing's happening at the amateur level. So guys, if you're watching YouTube videos and practicing and developing your game and wondering, how come it seems like you used to win more in the past? And actually I hear this a lot from people that think they used to play really good when they were younger. There's a couple things. One, your competition was worse. Two, the tables were probably softer because we used to play on, 5-inch valleys and big pocketed gold crowns. And now everything's like diamonds and predator, everything's super tight and tough now. Your competition's better. So the game has actually gotten physically tougher. Your competition has gotten better. And finally, you weren't as good as you think you were. Because when you look back, you're selectively remembering your best performances at the top of your range, and the ego is a little delusion. So if you look back, if you could actually time travel and watch day in, day out how you used to play, and then take the way you played day in, day out on your average and bad days and move it now to the competition of today and the tough equipment of today, it wouldn't do very well. Like, you are probably better now. And so it's just some things to keep into, things I have to remind myself. Like, I grew up in 5-inch holes against guys that let me, to the table twice a rack. And if I went back and played those guys, I would perform better. But in my mind, it's like easy to think that I'm getting worse because everything's got tougher.
So
that didn't answer peaking, but go ahead.
Yeah. So that's why I want you. If I listen to what you said, 2005 was a really good year for you when you cashed in the U.S. Open and whatnot. And then as you've gone by, you said so yourself that you haven't been able to repeat that. But on top of not being able to repeat that, you're adding in the factor of how much harder the competition has gotten. So in lieu of all that, do you think you have peaked? Because otherwise, if the answer is no, what is your roadmap towards trying to catch up with the level of competition?
Yeah. So I think that when we talk about a peak, I think the big question is, are we using this predictively, or are we using this retrospectively? Like, for example, can you, like, in 100 years, assuming Shane, no breakthroughs in technology and medicine, let's just assume that someday, Shane's not alive anymore, and we look back at his career, or we look back at Mosconi's career. Let's not pick on somebody that's alive. Let's pick on somebody that's already safely in the grave. I'm not trying to hex anybody. We might be able to look back at Mosconi's career and say, what was his peak as a player, as a competitor? And we might say, man, he ran 526 balls in like 1954, whatever it was. Like, that was his peak. Or we could look back at when he wins. Still dark. That's great. Or we could look back at when he won like the most world championships. Say that was his peak. We can look at that retrospectively and say, retrospectively, what was like, or we could look at Magnus Carlsen in chess. And after he's retired, we could say, what was his high ELO rating? Or what was his most dominant performance? Or what was this most dominant streak? So you can look back and make some judgment calls in retrospect. But predictively, to answer, are you at your peak now? Or is there more road ahead? I don't know that you can answer that predictively. And so now there might be some extreme cases. For example, as Shane gets older, it might be that, it's hard for me to even say he's at his peak, because maybe he's about to go on some run where he's got one more reborn, like, hey, I can still do this. I want one more before I go. And he might have 3 years in a row that, looking back, we say 2023 or 2022 to 2026 might end up being his peak. And we just don't know that yet. So it could happen. But at some point, when he's 65, 70, and he's not really competing anymore, like kind of like Efren is now, where he's just not really competing much and shows up at a tournament for fun once in a while. And we could see that Efren's not at his peak right now. Now we can look back and say, okay, his peak might have been in, the late 90s, or his peak might have been in 2005 at Derby when he won like every one pocket game for 5 years. So it's like, we can look back at that, but looking forward, it's very, very, very hard to say. And so my approach in general is, I don't believe I'm at my peak. I don't believe you're at your peak. And I think that instead of deciding in my head that I'm at my peak, I'm going to assume that I'm not and do everything I can to keep growing. And then someday when it's all said and done, I'll look back and I'll say, I found out what my peak was, but I found out on the table, not in my head.
I like that. I like that.
And then it's the thing about Shane and how dominant, how dominant somebody is in 2 years of Federer and 2 years of Sanchez. One thing I think that happens, somebody made the comment about how not only has competition gotten better, but that internationally, like more international players are traveling and playing and participating. So participation has gotten better as well as level. One thing that is a little irritating to me is part of the reason that everybody struggles to dominate now is because of the format. If we play single elimination sets, like, okay, think about your league. Think about the worst players in the league and the best players in the league. And if the competitions all became races to one, single elimination, bar table 8 ball, there's nobody that's going to win every tournament. There's just not going to happen. You're going to have a large number of people that take turns winning tournaments.
Sure.
And that range of skill that's able to win a tournament is going to be very wide. Because everybody can win a rack and anything can happen. But if you played some weird round robin where you were going to play 100 racks of 8 ball against everybody else in the league over a year, and then the guy with the best, there might only be like 1 or 2 guys that could win. So depending on the depth of the competition, it'll determine, like when Mosconi was winning world championship after world championship, it was straight pool. They were playing blocks of like 5,000 points or something like that, where it was like almost impossible for him to lose. But then the years he lost, it was like they went down to like 1 game to 150. And then he'd lose the title to Irving Crane. And he was really upset because they kept messing with the format of the world championship. And he's like, every world championship I won was round robin and long block sets. And then they switched the format to be more exciting for the fans and have 1 rack. And then somebody runs 100 balls on me and wins the title. And he thought it was a joke that he lost his title over that. So my opinion, and Matchroom, if they ever hear this, or somebody at WPA, or I don't want to get into that. Anyway, that got even darker. But the point is, I would love to see this, guys. They do this in chess. They do it in snooker. I would love to see pool have all the tournaments be fine. If Matchroom wants to do double elimination and single elimination in the finals, race to 11, race to 13 in the finals. But for the world championship, man, for that title, I would love to see like a race to 5 sets or a race to 7 sets over the course of 2 weeks, where they play races to 21 9-ball each day. Race to 21, race to 21, race to 21, race to 21. And somebody's got to win 7 sets first. And they have like a 2 to 3 week block where they play 2 days and then off a day, 2 days on, 1 day off. Because a couple things. First of all, I think the production cost, you only have 2 people on 1 table. Not that high of production cost, and the amount of views and attention. I think it would be a good investment. I think it would be a profitable endeavor. But number 2, it would be fun to watch for a couple reasons. One, you could see how the players' styles evolve and how they rally in the momentum swings and what their game plan is if they're just getting outplayed. And so, I think it would be fun to watch. And you might actually determine who the better player is. Which, do we always need every tournament to prove who the better player is? No. But wouldn't it be nice if our world champion, like in chess, when Magnus Carlsen won the world championship time after time, he was the highest rated player. He won the world championship. And anybody that played him had to play him 12 classical games of 6-hour chess and try to beat him. And it's like, good luck. But with pool, it's like race to 11. Everybody can run a bunch of racks. Let's see who gets there. And for our world championship, that seems a little crapshoot. I like that format for most tournaments, but I think for something like the world championship and the prestige of that world championship, I would love to see, and then I would love to see whoever won that 7 sets and became the world champion, that they were automatically they got to defend their title. And then they have a challenger win a tournament to challenge them, and then they hit the challenge. Because then if you had to play Francisco Sanchez Ruiz, and you had to play him best 13 sets, you're not just going to get up there and catch a gear and get a little lucky and win a set or catch him on a bad day. Like, you're going to have to win the title off him, and he gets to defend his title. So anyway, I love that, the idea. So the reason that right now it's so spurty with who's at the top, in my opinion, is because the format was structured to be high variance and exciting for fans, which is fine. But you're never going to see a guy dominate pool. When you look at the level of competition and how the depth of that level of competition combined with the format that we're using, nobody's going to be able to dominate it, which I think is fine in general. But I would like to see our world championship be a little bit more fleshed out, because if we had that format, maybe somebody could win the world championship 5 times in a row.
Right. I get it. I like it. I was actually gonna ask the question of whether or not like the long drawn out format is that good enough for television? Is that good enough for eyes? Like, because our attention span is so short now. Like that's why we watch 1 minute videos and TikToks or whatever. And the idea of a long drawn out match, who's got the stamina, the endurance to be able to do that?
And who's the better player? Yeah.
Yeah. Like I totally agree. At least with that, but then would that be the same? But my counter, I would say to that is that of course the answer is it could be, I would think, but I'm still going to ask the question. Could someone still dominate the format? Currently, we're not seeing it.
Yeah, we don't know. Like it could be that it's so tough that there's 5 guys, like maybe Filler could beat Federer, and then maybe Sanchez could beat Filler, and then maybe this new, Moritz Neuhausen could come along and win 1 year, and maybe nobody can hold it for long. But my guess is that it would do both. My guess is if they had that format, it might flip a little bit, but that it wouldn't surprise me if like Federer just owned it for 10 years, or or he wins 8 out of 10, and that Filler's great, and that Sanchez is great, but then in these long sessions, day after day, hour after hour, he just gets there again and again, and the more he gets there, the more confident he gets, the harder it is for anybody else, and he might just own it. But then there might be some weird spurt where some guy came along and just took it from him. And that I'm not saying that Federer would beat Filler. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying I would be unsurprised if somebody could dominate given a format that allowed them the opportunity.
Okay, that's fair.
I just don't know who it would be. And it might not, though. It might not. But I would love to find out.
Right.
But it's okay.
Okay. Well,
so you're not at your peak. I'm not at my peak. And even people that are getting older and their physical stamina and their, whatever is breaking down, guess what? If you were Efren Reyes, I want last comment on this, is you're Efren Reyes, or if you're Earl, or you're Johnny Archer, and you're or Buddy Hall, and you're physically not able to do what you used to do, and you used to be at the highest level in the world, I think, yes, you've probably peaked and you're not going to see your best days ahead of you. But that doesn't apply if you're a league player or a good league player and you're starting to slip in your eyesight and your back and your stamina and your, whatever, your focus isn't quite where it was, or maybe your hunger isn't quite where it was. That doesn't mean you're peaked, because the good news is if you're a league player or even a good, local tournament player, there's still so much room to develop in other areas of your game that you might be at 80% of your, this or 80% of that compared to what you used to. But if you get to 150% of where you are on a bunch of new stuff, you can still improve. And so I really want to let everyone know that, yes, it's possible that there are some people that probably are past their prime, but at the amateur level, there's so much room for growth. You're not there. You're the best days can be ahead of you. And the other last thought I had about slumps was that even when you're in a slump, a lot of times, if a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, then you might have 18 strong links and a couple weak ones holding you back. And if you're working and working and working and not seeing progress, maybe you're still strengthening all those other links. In fact, maybe those links are getting really strong because they're having to carry the 2 weak links. But you're not really seeing this big burst. And like, man, I'm putting all this input in, but I'm not getting that results yet. But then all of a sudden, one day, you stumble into some improvements or you have breakthroughs in those weak areas and they get stronger. And all of a sudden, those aren't holding you back. And all of a sudden, that rest of the game that's all bulked up now hits new levels that you didn't even know. So it can come in huge bursts when you least expect it. So just keep going.
Okay. I see one more question, and I think we're going to go ahead and call it from here. We've almost been streaming for like 3 hours. This has been great. I hope everybody's been enjoying this. Obviously, if you haven't done so already, just give the stream a thumbs up, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. And then, of course, consider subscribing to my channel. There is MN Pool Bootcamp YouTube channel as well. Demetrius, he says he's not a YouTuber, but he does have content. And every now and again, I try to encourage him to post more content.
Yeah, I've got some fun stuff. I'll make some more videos, and they'll be, the one thing I can say is they'll be different than I can't, like Chris said, he has to know his niche and how he was going to present to where people don't have questions. I try to present on stuff that's a little bit off the beaten path for people that have, watched Chris's videos, and I try to post stuff that's a little bit different. Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if you're going to be able to answer this, but I'm sure you might have an opinion on this. And this is from Now. He says, for 8-ball only, is it just me, or does it seem that pro players struggle more on the break on the Predator tables versus any other tables? Well, I'm going to go off and say I don't think it has anything to do with just the Predator tables in general.
Agreed.
Just a table's a table's a table. We can argue 4-inch pockets, 5-inch pockets, but whatever, because the table doesn't matter when it comes to breaking, because breaking is just breaking. I would want to venture to say that the struggle basically boils itself down to it's not a template rack. I don't care how professional the racker is. It's not a template. You cannot guarantee that every ball is frozen if it's not a template rack. And because of that variable, who knows what's going to happen? That's my feel, and that's what I'm sticking to. But what are your thoughts?
100% right. And then the question is it good or bad? Like, I actually think that for what they've done, I actually like it. So I remember watching, there was an 8-ball match being played one time, and I don't remember the players because it was very unmemorable, because they were playing template rack, big table 8-ball with new cloth. And so the pockets were playing a little soft. The table was breaking really, really well, to where when they broke, it looked like everything was floated apart. You couldn't tell which end of the table they broke on. Nothing was near 6 inches of another ball. And it was just, it was 2 balls would go in, and there's 13 balls floated apart, opened up nicely. And it's like top players on soft new cloth could run through those racks like until you're bored. It was like straight pool, where instead of having to break the rack, it's like if you just got to break, open break, and then run balls, and open break and run balls. It was that boring. And I watched like 17 or 18 racks and never saw an error, and I never saw a safety. And I don't even think I saw a breakout. I didn't even see a problem ball. It was like 15 racks without a problem ball. And I'm like, this is terrible. So if you're going to play 8-ball, bar tables actually make it interesting with, a little congestion. But using the triangle rack, yeah, it's absolutely the rack. They're using a triangle rack. They're not getting all the balls tight, and they're not breaking as well. And that adds a lot more interest in the game, more uncertainty on the break. They have to break harder. It becomes a little tougher shot to break the balls. And they have the average number of problem balls is way higher. The racks become interesting. And we actually saw safeties and some back and forth, and some suspense and some skill that wasn't really needed before. So I like it. And the same thing with their 10-ball tournaments, where they have the triangle racks. They went away with the template. All the top players break from the box, and they hit them square, and they make 2 balls on the side, and they end up making 3 balls on the break. And it's actually easier than 9-ball. But with those triangle racks, even Shane and Tyler Steyer and all these guys with that squash and break, they went back to breaking off the rail and hitting them hard like in the 90s. And all of a sudden, it created some adversity and some diversity. And so I think that there's an argument to be made that triangle racking, and you know what, Matchroom, they use template racks through most of the tournament, but then in the final 16, they go to the triangle rack. And I like it. I think that template racks, I'm not saying flat out they shouldn't exist, but I definitely think that there's some advantages to using a triangle rack when you have a referee racking. If you have players racking for each other or racking for themselves with a triangle, then you get into shenanigans and gaming. But when there's a neutral referee available, I think triangle racking is great.
Okay. All right. So I think that's pretty much going to end it for now, because like we can probably, just sit here.
I'm sorry. He mentioned to Derby City, they have done triangle racks, and the pros still make balls there. That's it's rack your own. And actually, the last few years, the last few years where I've been using templates at Derby the last few years I've been there. But even if they use triangle racks, I think the time that like Shane was racking and Sean had the shenanigans, it was like rack your own. So if it's rack your own or rack for your opponent, triangle racks get a little dicey. But if it's triangle rack your own, then because then you can make it almost as good as a template if you know how to rack for yourself. Okay, sorry.
Correct.
We'll call it a day. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got more stuff involved. Like I said, we're gonna switch
Pockets
to using
balls, yeah.
Switch to the main cameras and stuff. But that's not till tomorrow. Like I said, I have league tonight, and I'll throw this out onto the table when we get back because it'll be late in the evening. If we're up for it, we might just go ahead and go live again and just do an exhibition. Just no lessons or nothing. Let's just battle it out. But we'll see. Like I'm not gonna promise anything, but it's certainly a possibility. So that way we can try to maximize Demetrius's time for being here. And I know we already had some requests of exhibition matches between the two of us, and we're happy to do so. We do it every time we get together.
You can vote in the comments if you want to see 8-ball, 9-ball, 10-ball, straight pool, one pocket.
Yeah,
jacked up one-handed banks, whatever you want to see.
So just let us know. But we're gonna go ahead and end this stream for now. So I certainly want to thank everybody for being here. I don't really have the metrics of how many were watching on YouTube versus how many were watching on Facebook because here in my garage, I don't have the same setup like I have in my office. I haven't moved all the bells and whistles that I have in my office where I can see all of that in here just yet. But I certainly want to thank everybody for being here. I hope everybody was able to enjoy what they've heard. And Demetrius, clearly, I hope you enjoyed answering the questions and having the discussions that we've had here. And then, of course, I look forward to what we have going on for the next couple of days. So just be sure to stay tuned, everybody, because we've got more action coming. And then shortly after that, that's when I'll announce my winners of my giveaways.
Yeah, I'm going to be taking some of the most short, concise, the most value-packed lessons that I've given people over the years, and some of the things I've seen that have done the most good with the least time. And I'm going to try to break some of those things down on the table over the next couple of days. So stay tuned. And I really just want to say, I'm just overwhelmed with gratitude that you guys would share your time and tune in. So thanks for the positivity and for your time and attention. And I'll try to do what I can to help you enjoy a finer game of pool along the way.
Okay. And as always, in closing, if you haven't done so, please give this stream a thumbs up. It doesn't matter whether you're on Facebook or on YouTube, but if at least you're on Facebook, maybe consider sharing the stream to your Facebook profiles. That way your friends and family can get to know us. This is what helps grow the sport, right? Especially if any of your friends and family are not interested in pool, and stuff like this hopefully helps them get interested in pool, which is what creates the level of competition.
If you don't share the stream, the terrorists win. Don't let the terrorists win.
And then, of course, maybe share it to your favorite pool groups as well. And then, of course, liking the stream on YouTube helps me out in the YouTube algorithm, so that way people can discover this stream after the fact. And then, of course, later on, I will go through and timestamp everything on YouTube, so that way if you're watching this after the fact, you can hopefully jump around to different topics rather than watching a complete 3-hour live stream from beginning to end. We really would appreciate it. But in the meantime, just stay tuned and we'll see you later.
12.4 savvy.